Audio. Audio. What's that for? Yo. Test. That looks like sound. It looks like it sounds too, doesn't it? Mm-mm. That's okay. Hmm? How is that possible? Oh no. Mm. Test. I think we may be back. I'll be sure yet. Let's give it a minute. The screen is frozen or something. What's up, bro? Appreciate that, man. Hope you're having a good morning too. Why do you think I'm right though? Just make sure everything is going. How can one screen be behind? Interesting. Ooh. Okay. We are live. Something is missing though. Ooh, in the moonlight. Look at that. Terrible outfit. He's a man who dresses for practicality, isn't he? Let's go live. Alright. I keep pressing the wrong button. So apparently we're back in space. I think they said it's going to be 10 days of orbiting Earth first, which is crazy, which means they're probably going to spend longer going around Earth than actually going to the moon, which is suspicious, but really they can't exactly orbit a disk. Maybe, maybe, maybe some flat earthers could educate me on exactly what it is that's taking place over at NASA today. Let's get a sound check. Let's get a sound check. Sounds checky to me. Alright. Wipe my snot box. I get the feeling we're going to be doing a lot of this. It's allergy season. Right. For the first part of this stream, I'm just going to be mining points to level up this character. Ah, I forgot to put on the ring. Excuse me. Guess not. Okay. The ring is still with the increases physical damage absorption. Let's change that out for now. I'm from the UK. Where are you from? If you can hear me. Let me know if you can hear me. Sojo, that's not true. Why don't you explain your understanding of what morality is? You? Start YG. Game's Dark Souls. Dark Souls 3. It's gonna look boring for a minute. Just trying to get my character up a level. Looks like Assassin's Creed. What? Which one? I haven't played Assassin's Creed in years. Funny guy. My definition of morality is a system of determining what's good and bad, what's right and wrong. Now, why don't you tell me your understanding of morality? Witness stand. It's my show, damn it. Who do you think you are? I was having a laugh yesterday. This weekend is like box the jumping of a guy thousands of years ago. They jumped the shit out of Jesus, man. They beat his ass. It's wild. It's actually wild when you think about it. If it did happen anyway, so it's kind of wild. What do you mean, what system would be good? I don't think you understand what morality is. That's why you're asking these questions in the first place. Morality, as defined, is a system of determining what is good and bad and what is right and wrong. That's how it's defined in very simple terms. But yeah, like morality has very little to do with God. It's just religious people think that, and they tend to have the weakest ethical framework out of them all. But I'm giving you too much knowledge off the bat. It's too early to educate you yet. I want to hear what you think. I have no plans of being a tutor today, seeing as I don't get paid tutor prices. But I will share some nuggets. Just want to get into some gamage. It's been a while. Okay, interesting. Let's entertain that, Sojo. What would be wrong about being your own god? Not that I agree with that, but let's follow your line of reasoning. What would be wrong about it? Again, this has very little to do with morality. Takumo depends which type of morality you subscribe to. Ironically, all ethical frameworks are ultimately subjective. So, in simple terms, you as an individual are always the moral agent. So, whether you think you get the term, if you take a realist stance on morality or an anti-realist stance on morality, both positions are ultimately subjective. But yeah. Yeah, like I just said, Sojo. So within morality, right? There's a field of study called moral philosophy. Within moral philosophy, there are various different moral frameworks or ethical frameworks. It's quite a lot to go into. As I said, as the stream goes on, I'll expand on it more. To be fair, you're watching on a vertical stream. You need to come to the main channel, which is Culture Crack on YouTube or Set West 10 on TikTok. When I start explaining stuff, I'll put visual aids on those screens. So the stream that you're on, you're not going to be able to see like the explanations, the pictures, all these kinds of things that help people absorb the information. But there are various systems within morality. There's truth be told, as far as I'm aware, there's never been one singular system of morals or ethics throughout human history. But the source of creation. So GTG, how do you know that God is the source of creation if a human didn't tell you that? Are you telling me you came to that understanding by yourself? I mean, you just completely invented the vocabulary, everything. Um, I mean, I've bought Christmas presents for people in the past. I usually just give them money nowadays, though, to be fair. Just makes life easier. So what type of God are you talking about? There are thousands of gods, different conceptual frameworks for them. What type of God are you talking about, GT? Interestingly enough, JTC, it didn't really happen like that. The idea of gods came around through evolution. So it started off as something called hyperactive agency detection device, which is basically humans, our ancestors. We still do this today, but our ancestors assigned agency to elemental things and celestial things. Elemental things are earth, wind, water, and fire, like forms of nature, hurricanes, tsunamis, volcanoes. And celestial things are like stars, the sun, the moon, solar eclipses, things like that. And to assign agency simply means thinking something has the capacity to act on its own. As a mind, in other words. I don't know if agency necessarily means you must have a mind, though, to be fair, but it depends. Really does depend. Sugun, no, not really. I used to, but the more like if you try to apply like first principles thinking to some things like that, like the soul, where does it really lead to? What does a soul mean? What does it entail? Where did we get the idea from? How would you describe a soul? You know, these kinds of things. I'm not quite sure how to say your name. Your name is Jewish, I believe. Alchemical. I've heard of the Kabbalah, yeah. Ooh, you got me there, boy. I think logic is axiomatic. I think we developed the language to make use of logic, but I think logic itself is a fundamental thing found in the universe. There are various different types of logic, after all, but like classic logic appears to be axiomatic. So what kind, again, GTG, what kind of God do you mean then, bro? If you're saying that the religious God isn't real, but there's a God that creates everything, then where did you get that idea from? What's up, God make? What's up, J2? Well, emotions are actually just like I think it's called biochemical stimuli. Right? Feelings are when you frame your emotions through your mind, right? Through your thoughts, your character, like your personality. But emotions are completely out of your control. They're actually just biological reactions to things. You know, like adrenaline, norepinephrine, oxytocin, the raising of the heart rate, all these kinds of things, serotonin. So, being that we are biochemical, like we're chemical by nature, that's not really a surprise that we would have emotions. Because emotions are literally just chemicals reacting. I wouldn't say it comes from the universe. It just seems to be a fundamental part of the universe. For instance, like I haven't thought about this in a while, but it's like the law of identity, the law of non-contradiction, the law of excluded middle. All these three things seem to be constantly at play. Right? So in order for something to be, for instance, to be able to differentiate an apple from an orange, logic must be at play in some form. You know. Good morning, bro. How you doing? So that's why people would say it's axiomatic. You know. Hopefully that makes sense to you. I mean, Zahid, but it depends on what you subscribe to, right? What do you mean non-physical side of things? You know, that seems like more of a philosophical position. Now, obviously, there are immaterial things. I would grant that, but what do you mean by that? Non-physical. I don't know if we get enough points yet. I don't know, man. Again, that really depends on your opinion of things. You know, there's such a thing called psychophysical identity theory, which is basically just saying the mind is identical to the brain. So you would say like your mind is the immaterial product of your brain. So from a like a physicalist point of view, you'd say your mind is an emergent property of your brain, and your brain is physical matter. It's literally neurons firing. So it really depends on your personal position on that. To be fair with you, I don't know. I know it's weird. I could tell you that much, but when we start getting like too deep into like weird views, not they're not weird, but you know what I mean. They can be a bit confusing. Uh, there's a lot to be said from a deterministic point of view. Oh, proof of a Concord kept. I think it comes from historical facts, bro. I mean, I'll pull more stuff out later, but I just started the stream. I want to really just chill, chat to chat for a bit before we get into the like just the information stuff. Some people like being able to see the visual aids and getting the information, the background data on why I say what I say. Some people don't, so just mix it up a bit. Yeah, I would agree. That's why there's this such thing as the hard problem of consciousness. But again, I'm not one to really have a deep opinion on that. The best I could say is what I've been taught is consciousness is the ability to experience and awareness. Beyond that, I couldn't really tell you anything more. Some push-ups, yeah, kind of grinding. Nah, not philosophy in any way. Just personal study, bro. Yeah, but GTG, as I said, where did you get the idea from in the first place? Like, how could one know that's even the case? What if there isn't a creator god? Put it like this: the way we've come up with gods in general, how we define them, and the things we say they do and don't do, it's entirely possible that a god exists and is still not responsible for creating anything. So there's that. Do you know what I mean? So that's kind of crazy. I'd say Elden Ring's my favorite Souls game. Well, yeah, technically a Souls game. I'm still playing the DLC, but I wanted to take a break from it, so we're playing a bit of this today. Hendrick, I have no idea. Maybe. Actually, I would say technically it has evolved. If you mean just like cognitive functions in general, then yeah, cognitive functions have definitely evolved. But I don't. Again, like I just said, when I say all I know about consciousness is that it's just the ability to experience and awareness. I don't know what more that entails really. What's up, Brian? I don't think there's any philosophers on that side, on that side of the stream just now, Brian. To be fair with you, we're plenty noobs here, me too included. What's up, Jordan? So what do you mean, Jai? How can you Why don't you explain what you mean when you say your own experiences and historical facts? What how do they coincide? If that's the right way to put it. Masano, yeah, that seems to be a pretty damn doctrine, isn't it? Oh, it's unfortunate because there are billions of people who don't believe in Jesus Christ. And even before Christianity came about, no one believed in Jesus Christ. So I guess everyone is cooked then, basically. But luckily for us, religion's not really real. Not in that sense, anyways. I come to philosophize. Fair play. What are you gonna philosophize about? When I first read that, I thought he said fillet of fish. That's what I saw. But it's dyslexia for you. Alright. How much points do we need? No, we got enough. Should we stay for a second round? Yeah, why not? Oh, religion's 100% man-made. There could be a higher power indeed, but when you say higher power, be very clear. What do you mean by higher power? Still, even that idea is super vague. No, GTG, it's not true, right? Now, there's such a thing called habit of thought or habit of thinking, where people think, um, everything follows like a causation, like a linear causation, if that makes sense. I forget the right word for it. Again, it's been a while since I entertained these kinds of ideas. But basically, you're right. It could be a habit of thought to think, oh, everything comes from somewhere. But that doesn't necessarily mean you'd produce the idea of the God that you have in your mind already. You know? But billions of people over like the history of human history, like 300,000 or a bit more years, have thought of different ways of how things come about and even produce different concepts of gods of how things like how they operate. So just because you think like it's contingency, that's the word I was looking for. Just because you think that contingency is a thing, it doesn't necessarily lead you to a god in the way you're describing it. Casino, nah, I don't gamble, bro. I don't bet unless it's a sure thing. I guess you wouldn't be able to say that's a bet. Like the other night, I was gonna bet on Moses a Atuma to knock out that guy, but I looked at the odds. It was like, well, this is obvious. It's gonna get like £4 back. Like, it's just waste of money and time, bro. But nah, I don't gamble personally. Hence why I don't believe in religions. Not joking. So when I said idea, I meant the idea of God you're talking about as a creator or the source of all life and functioning within it, and all that kind of stuff you said. Yeet. Contingent. Me personally, I'd say we come from the same natural process that produces everything else on the planet, to be honest. So it would be like a process of like evolution, basically. So like. So you could say following on from some kind of Big Bang, you get like abiogenesis, speciation, evolution. That would be based like the very simplified natural process in which things come about. I'm actually going to be explaining that as the stream goes on, Jaya, right? So there's three main things, right? God concepts come out, follow through. Well, so when I say humans invented God, let's just go through it quickly, briefly, right? I'll try to do it without visual aids for people on the vertical stream. So when I say humans invented God, it's what's called an explanatory claim. I feel it has explanatory success because it explains the how and the why, and in some instances the when and the where. It also has predictive power when we're thinking about types of gods that we're going to come up across in the future, god beliefs, without having to posit the existence of any supernatural entities at all. Right? So, in terms of you saying, oh, there's been these humans that have this connected view of God throughout history, you're kind of right, but you're not really hitting the mark properly, right? What you're pointing to is the fact that behind all gods there are humans. That's really what you're pointing to. So how did we do it? Right, it happened in three phases, per my hypothesis. Right, phase one is assigning agency to things, assigning agency to elemental things and celestial things. Elemental things are earth, wind, water, fire, and various forms of nature: hurricanes, tsunamis, volcanoes, earthquakes. Celestial is sun, moon, Mars, Pluto, Saturn. I don't know if Pluto counts anymore. Saturn, they're like just stars, like I wouldn't say extraterrestrial, but just things outside of the planet. Okay, so early humans, even today, we have this capability, which is on the screen. This is the most recent like codification of this idea, of this theory, right? So humans have this built-in device called hyperactive agency detection device. And as I said, phase one of God creations or God inventions is assigning agency to things. Phase two is abstraction for psychological needs, and phase three is anthropomorphizing for societal cohesion. Okay, so all God concepts across the planet all started from an evolutionary point of view from hyperactive agency detection device. If that god fits into certain configurations, those configurations being monotheism, polytheism, pantheism, panentheism, deism, dualism, animism, henotheism. Okay? Within those configurations there are various different types of gods. Okay, but as what connects all of these god concepts is that it's humans producing them in different regions at different times for different reasons. Okay, but primarily the function that allows for the how is this hyperactive agency detection device. Now I'll read the example for you. I'll read the overview for you. You can go look into it for yourself, and then I'll give you two real world examples of how it applies. So hyperactive agency detection device, also acronized, if that's the right word to say, also the acronym HAD with an extra D, is a cognitive theory suggesting humans have an evolved built-in tendency to quickly attribute events and movements to intentional agents, e.g. people, spirits, and gods. Right? It's done to enhance survival, even when none exist. It acts like a mental smoke detector for threats, which explains beliefs in the supernatural and feelings of being watched. Right. So I'll read the rest of the overview. Then I'll give you an example. This theory was coined by a guy called Justin Barrett. You may have heard his name for other experiments that people famously misinterpret. Had posits that a false positive, seeing an agent where there isn't one, was safer in ancestral environments than a false negative, missing a real threat. This hypersensitivity leads to anthropomorphizing. Anthropomorphizing means giving things human nature or human features. Leads to anthropomorphizing and seeing purpose in randomness, also known as apophenia, and forms the foundation for religious beliefs. Alright, so here are the real world examples of how this applies and how it pertains to creating gods and why you find different gods in different places across time. So, in the modern day example of how this hyperactive agency detection device is used, you're just being a normal human living a modern life. You're laying in bed on your iPhone or in your PlayStation or whatever, and you hear a bang in your house or wherever it is you live. That bang is called sensory stimuli, right? So that sound is stimuli, it's sensory, right? So you hear that sound and subconsciously you assign agency to that sound. What does that actually look like in the most practical sense? So a normal healthy human being would hear that bang while they're laying in bed at night and they would say, oh, that's a thief, someone's trying to break in. Oh, maybe that's the dog, or maybe that's a family member like rummaging around. Someone with a more, let's say, a different type of thinking, right? About being disrespectful too early, would say, oh, that bang that I just heard was a ghost, that was a spirit, that was God, that was a sign, right? So they'd get very much more like superstitious with their interpretation of agency, right? So they'd start assigning that sound, that stimuli, to something outer, otherworldly, basically. Whereas a normal person would be like, that's a human or animal, something that we have prior reference of existing. Okay, that's how that looks in modern time. We still make use of hyperactive agency detection device just like that every day in our normal life. Okay, so our ancestors, how they used it. This is before we get into how they invented gods with it. So our ancestors, how they used it. Jim and John are out foraging for berries, right? Let's say Jim and Jane, right? Jim and Jane are out foraging for berries. Jim and Jane see a bush rustling. So this is the sensory stimuli, right? They're seeing something and they're hearing something, okay? Jane takes off running as soon as this stimuli is received by her mind. She takes off running. Why does Jane take off running? Because she's assigned agency to the bush. By her assigning agency to the bush, she is subconsciously said the bush itself is either alive and acting on its own capacity, or there is a predator in the bush. By Jane taking off running, she has ensured her survival, therefore the survival of her genes and her children, okay? Whereas Jim, who stands there, has got like, I don't know, less than a 50-50 chance that the bush might be alive, because it's probably not alive, knowing that we know bushes aren't alive. But there could be a predator in that bush, which leaves Jim's chances of survival much lower than Jane's, right? So that's the practical use of hyperactive agency detection device, ancestrally and modern times, right? So how did they make use of hyperactive agency detection device to produce gods? Well, many of our ancestors would have experienced something like a hurricane, a thunderstorm, a tsunami. These are very massive acts of nature that would leave the average human being in what's called awe, right? Just like shock and awe, surprise, right? For instance, one of our ancestors experiences a thunderstorm. They see the sky blackening. So they're getting what's called observational stimuli, so to speak. They're observing things in their reality. They see the sky blackening, they hear the bellows of thunder, and then eventually they see what me and you today understand to be lightning. Right? They don't have context for these things besides them just being random acts of nature. They don't know that they're regular, they come about naturally. Right? They don't have access to this information yet. But so they see the light, they see the thunderstorm, then they see the lightning. The ancestor's mind says, I have a mind. I don't understand that thing which is lightning that's just burst something into flames. Therefore, that thing must have a mind of its own, e.g. agency, that lightning is acting on its own accord, or there is a mind behind the lightning. You know, like visions of Zeus throwing lightning bolts. That's where that comes from later, through evolution, right? Not just Zeus, Shango, Thor, etc. Right? Across the world, you get that exact depiction of gods of thunder for this reason, because it's observational. So the ancestral mind assigns agency to the thunderstorm, to the earthquake, to the volcano, to the tsunami. If when they survive, they go on to tell that story to their tribal members, right, in whichever language they are capable of conveying it, like whether it's through picture, through pointing, etc. This information becomes legend, becomes lore, and over time, the event that is lightning, the event that is the earthquake, gets deified. Deification is turning something into a god. Right? Again, this is like before they have the conceptual vocabulary for this. Right? This is all taking place culturally, as you would see in cultural anthropology. Okay, so over time, the event gets deified. Why does the event get deified? Right, because it ensures survival ultimately. Then they begin to make proto religions and like it's not, I forget the word. Rituals, proto rituals, right? Thinking of ways to try to appease the gods, right? Appease nature, appease a celestial event like a eclipse, right? Can you imagine seeing an eclipse in ancient times? Right? It's weird enough now. So they start to come up with these rituals around the event to help ensure survival, right? So that's the first phase of God creation. That's why there are various different types of God creations that are observational, popping up across the planet. Right? That's the only overlap, is the observation. The second phase, well, it's not the only overlap, they all overlap in some ways, but the second phase is abstraction. So we move beyond observational to psychological. Abstract things would be love, war, knowledge, creation, death, magic. Right? These are things you can express in various forms, but they're not tangible things you can hold, like earth or water or make use of fire, you know. So these things matter. And again, like I said, I don't want to go too deep too early because some people just aren't able to keep up. But yes, that's why there is an overlap across God creations, right? There's way more to it. Like I said, I'm trying not to be too tutorish about it, because who the hell am I after all? Just a guy. And who the hell are you? Nobody. Alright, so the three phases of God creation. First is assigning agency to things. Second is abstraction, and the third is anthropomorphism. You'll find this across all types of gods, even the God of the Bible. They all follow this evolutionary trajectory, right? The first is done for survival primarily, to understand your environment. The second is done for psychological needs, to start to give answers to large questions, mostly existential questions. And the third is done for societal cohesion, to organize people under ideologies. Okay, and you'll find that in every type of God concept on the planet. So anyways, let's get back to the chat. So yeah, I can't remember who asked me that question now. It does take quite a long time to explain all this, so I don't want to have to go over it like 100 times in a stream. So I'll try and make it a bit more sparse. Guys on the vertical YouTube, you didn't see the explainers on the screen, but don't worry about it. Peter, I literally just explained how we invented a god, bro. But yes, we definitely invented religion too, bro. Update the screen, what's the matter? Can't see anything. No, I didn't see anything to change, but anyways. Exactly, Albert. That's all I'm trying to share with people. That's all I'm trying to share. Peter, well, I don't think you're very well studied on the Bible, or else you wouldn't really have gone to 500 witnesses. It's kind of low level Bible talk. The 500 witnesses aren't actually accounted for as people. It'd be like me saying, "Oh yeah, bro, today there was a car crash and there was like 500 people just standing on the motorway. Who are the 500 people, right?" It's truly just an exaggeration of a fact. Why such a square number as well? Like, so it's just it's a waste of time arguing with you about your religion. Your religion is completely secondary to whether gods exist or not. In all honesty, religion pertains to cultures of humans. But yeah, I explained that, didn't I, Bucko? Personally, I don't really hold a belief around it, Alex. I mean, you know, I wouldn't say I'm well educated on the subject, but I know the basics from like science. You know, so you got your Big Bang theories, whichever model you follow. You got early Earth environment, the production of gas, and then eventually water, abiogenesis, speciation, evolution. Just basically, in very simplistic terms, that's my view of how things come about. Now that could be wrong, but I feel that those fields of study have like thousands of man hours in them, a lot of experimentation, a lot of evidence. So that they all of them follow what's called scientific theories. So they're not just guesses and beliefs, you know. So I think that's the things I mentioned: evolution, abiogenesis, speciation, Big Bang, are all pretty substantiated in comparison to a creationist myth, which comes from Mesopotamia, passed down to Babylonians, passed down to Israelites, you know, passed down to you. But yeah, in terms of beliefs, I try to abstain from beliefs because you could be wrong. So you always got to leave that room for error. Now, obviously, people do have a, put it this way, I'm talking too much, but just jumping from concept to concept so you follow. Belief and faith are necessary in terms of cognitive functions in enabling you to reason, but how belief and faith are used in the context of religion are different. Belief in the context of religion is to accept without proof. Faith is to trust in something that's unseen in the context of religion, you know. So in terms of like cognitive functions, you need to be able to hold information and return to it. That's where we talk about beliefs and faith in terms of reasoning. So a lot of people like to conflate that. So, what's up, Alf? What's up, Dirt Man? Give me a sec. Absolutely, there is no proof you're going to wake up. No, there's absolutely no proof you're going to wake up. But you have the expectation based on previous days, right? What's up, Kathy? What's up, Buster? Funny name. No, they didn't prove a necessary being. That's not even true. Rush Hour, pretty much. I don't know, therefore gods. No, that's not actually true, right? So you can like a priori reason to an uncaused cause, but an uncaused cause is not synonymous with a necessary being. What you're doing is mixing up apologetics and philosophy. They're not the same thing, bro. Or you could say you're mixing in an apologetic style of theology with philosophy. So a necessary being isn't something that's actually been proven. In fact, you can't prove these things. You can have logical proofs in terms of you giving a syllogism, right, and it being good, but that doesn't necessarily bring the thing into existence, as I'm sure you well know. Hopefully. So spreading. I think animism's interesting. I don't know a lot about it. All I know is that it's one of the oldest god configurations. Well, I don't know if it'd be right to call it a god in a classical sense. Like that's what I know about it. It's like indigenous practices. When I think of animism, I kind of think of remember back in the day in Mortal Kombat, you have that animistic bit, like where your character turns into like like Liu Kang will turn into a dragon kind of thing, right? Like that. What's up, Ellie? Thanks for the likes. No, so I definitely accept the three laws of classic logic, but as I said, reasoning to an uncaused cause is something you can do a priori, but it doesn't necessarily line up with like a deity or an immaterial spirit, a disembodied mind. It's not necessarily the same thing. And when I say prove, I'm just using prove in a very simple, like in a normal context. Right? It's very difficult to prove these things exist, specifically because they're apparently transcendental. So you can't actually have tangible knowledge of it, really. You can only reference to it. Or what's the word? can only infer things about it truthfully, but you can't actually be sure. Bible isn't proven anything we're talking about. At least not what he was talking about. The Bible has nothing to do with that. No, heaven and hell aren't real, bro. Like like as metaphors, yeah, but as actual places, no. The word hell is not even the correct translation in the Bible. It's a mistranslation. Like to get hell, they used what's called Sheol, Tartar. I think it's like Tartarus or something like that. Hades. They basically mixed up Hebrew ideas of the grave and a pile of dead people outside the town, and then the Greek ideas of Hades and underworld to give you what you call hell in the Bible. So hell by that standard of the Bible doesn't even really exist. It's just a complete effort by King James and his people. Okay. Wonder bucket? That's a really weird question, bro. I mean, I don't know, right? Because I'm not God, so I couldn't say. Like, but as far as I'm concerned, all known gods are psychological constructs and do not exist independently of the mind. If your god requires belief, imagination, or faith to interact with, it's functionally non-existent. We've got plenty of data to suggest humans have produced every type of god concept you've ever heard of. And in order for you to know about a god concept, someone has to transmit it via language or by artifact, or you yourself have to come up with it in order for it to have any meaningfulness to you. So, yeah, like, if a god existed, like, let's put it like this: if there was something out there, it wouldn't be what we call a god, you know, because gods primarily are things that humans invent. So there could be something with like crazy amounts of powers out there beyond the universe or within the universe. Beyond the universe is even possible. There could be something crazy out there, just unimaginable, but it's not going to be God, because God is something that we invented. Nah, I never heard of him, Kathy. No, not all gods. So, like, when I use the word God specifically, like in the prompt, I'm just using it as a category definer for like spirits, entities, deities, like, you know, because there are various different types of gods as we'll go through later on. Not all gods follow like So put it this way, all gods follow an evolutionary trajectory, as I said, like per my hypothesis, three phases. Phase one, assigning agency to things, observational things, celestial things, elemental things. Phase two, abstraction for psychological needs. Phase three, anthropomorphizing for societal cohesion. All gods follow that evolutionary trajectory. So the different types of gods pop up in different configurations in different regions and different times. In order to have the understanding of God that most people have today, which is known as the three O God, Omni God, omniscient, omnipotent, omnibenevolent, that also has gone through and undergone an evolutionary trajectory of mixing lots of what's called post hoc philosophy with ancient theology to get to the God concept that most of us believe today. I say us, but most of you believe today, which is like a disembodied mind, an immaterial spirit, sometimes a creator God, sometimes not. If you follow the genealogy of the God of the Bible, he starts out as a storm warrior god called Yahweh. He only ends up God the Father and the Creator much later, after lots of people adding ideas to him, and then through Christianity he becomes part of a triune configuration with Jesus and the Holy Spirit. So even the God of the Bible goes through an evolutionary trajectory. Right, it doesn't take much to look this up. Go speak to a theologian. It's very well known information. Yes. Anyways, what you know, I really don't have tolerance for people who just say no, this is all lies, but don't provide anything. Get out of there, bro. Jumped. If you're gonna disagree, right, and put forward why. Anyone can just say no, I don't like what you're saying, therefore it's a lie. Right? I know I'm not lying about anything. Got no reason to lie. I ain't got no patience for that kind of stuff. Um, I think good and bad are just value judgments. Lemore. So you can assign value judgments to anything you choose to, really. But so far as like good being a unique substance and bad being a unique substance unto itself, I've got no reason to think that. Just like, or put it this way, thinking evil is like a unique substance on its own. I've got no reason to think that. So I don't think, I don't think anything is produced like fundamentally bad or good. It's just your view of whatever it is. Well, anything natural, anyways. Right? Humans definitely make things that that are bad. We definitely make lots of things that are bad. But then again, you could argue that's just my subjective view, right? Why would I believe in Islam considering what I'm saying, bro? I would say, in terms of what I've learned so far, I would be completely ideologically opposed to any Abrahamic faith. So that's just off the cards for me. Yeah, well, again, morality isn't something that's set in stone either, bro. Again, like as we've covered many times and earlier in the stream, what is the standard definition of morality or moral? It's the system of determining what is good and bad, what is right and wrong. There are many different frameworks of determining what is good and bad and what is right and wrong. There's no universal idea of that. There never has been, and there probably never will be. I mean, I mess with Haitians, bro. I think it's a good. I think Voudon and all of those ancient, like, well, they're not really the ancient traditional version. I think all of those things are very good things. Like, I think every group of people on the planet should go back to their indigenous practices and their understanding of the world. Pre-colonization, right? It's very necessary. So I wouldn't have any problem with that. To be honest with you, I still think it's not real. Right? Just like I wouldn't think like Norse paganism magic is real either. But I think it's a good idea to be in touch with it since it's your ancestry and the understanding of your culture. What makes your haplogroup, all those kinds of weird shit. Like, I think it's good to know that stuff, but it's no, it's no realer or faker than anything you're gonna find in the Bible. It's free. No, I don't think it's just a lie. Like I've been saying, like what I'm currently reading, it's becoming more apparent that there are actually only three religions, and the only reason we can say, like, justifiably say that there are only three religions, because religions are something that are produced by imperialism. And if you study how the Abrahamics function, they are primarily imperialistic vehicles, or you know, vehicles of colonization. It's done to expand empire. Outside of the Abrahamic religions, right, what you're looking at is cultural indigenous practices. Sikhism is a cultural practice, Buddhism cultural practice, Hinduism cultural practice, Jainism, etc. These are cultural practices. The Abrahamic faiths are designed to expand, right, and to bring people in, like an empire is designed to expand, capture land and capture people. So to say religion is built as a lie is not necessarily true, but the only three religions are ultimately imperialist vehicles. Right? So they're not they're not done with the intention just to enlighten you, make your life better. There are many ways to become enlightened in some factors, in some ways, and make your life better. But religion, as we understand it today, isn't designed for that. It's literally designed to expand empires. Mm. But anyways, not seen anything really interesting. A lot of people spewing guts. How can you talk about morality if you don't have a god? Again, like you're just identifying yourself as ignorant. I love that for you. No, that's not true. There's no evidence that Jesus is anything more than a man. If I was gonna be, charitable, I'd say yes. Yeshua ben Joseph or something like that. A Bronze Age or Iron Age Judaic priest may have existed, but Jesus Christ, as described in the New Testament, did not exist. Okay, that's like a culmination of a bunch of mythos and like philosophy, different people's ideologies. That guy didn't actually exist. There's no evidence of the divine birth, no evidence of the resurrection, no evidence of the miracles. In fact, all three of those things overlap with other mythos or mythology. But as I said, if I was going to be charitable, I'd give you Yahshua, but Yahshua is not Jesus Christ as described in the New Testament. Sorry to say. Talk to people who are very educated on the subject, they can give you a bit more in-depth information about that. But yeah, there is no evidence of what you're talking about. No idea, bro. I don't think Genesis is supposed to be taken literally, Dirtman. Like, what's... So, let's put up screen quickly. What's found in Genesis? Genesis is like an expansion on an earlier story told by Mesopotamians. Told by Mesopotamians on what's called the Creationist Tablet. Genesis is like an expansion of that. The same thing could be said about Noah's Ark. It's an expansion on a story told by ancient Mesopotamians or Sumerians about great floods. Genesis isn't supposed to be taken literally, considering all of the information we found out about Earth since, you'd say Genesis was more like a allegoric or metaphorical. So the question of dinosaurs is just something funny to throw at creationists, but I've got no reason to think Genesis was ever supposed to be serious in the first place. That's the Ark tablet that lays the foundation for Noah's Ark. Anyways. John, that's funny. Well, I never said it. I never said religion is fake, did I? That's not even a. It's not even a coherent sentence, really. What does that even mean? I don't know about that. Wonder bucket. That sounds like some hermeneutics kind of interpretation. So the original Genesis passed down by the Israelites and the Jews, which become the Jews, is not in the same. It's not really interpreted the same way as Christians interpret it. For instance, stuff like original sin wasn't part of the interpretation either, from the Jewish side of the table. So the things you're providing are really just different people's analysis on a piece of literature, not necessarily our reality. Because again, Genesis doesn't actually match up with what we find in reality. Even the creation of the story, like the 7 days thing, doesn't match reality. So I mean, again, you can have your comfort blanket, which is religion, but it has very little to do with God's ultimately. No, I don't think that there's like, put it this way, even it's just the problem is this, like I'm in the same boat as you in a sense, right? I wasn't taught this kind of stuff in school. I had to learn this stuff myself, right? Morality isn't just simply, those like stories that teachers used to tell you as you sit on the mat and they read your story, and at the end they're like, moral of the story is da da da, right? Morality doesn't actually function like that. Morality, in as defined, is a system of determining good and bad, right and wrong. Within what's called moral philosophy, it's like it's a field of study that's existed for I don't know, maybe 1,000+ years now, or less. Not quite sure time wise, but it's a very well researched field of study. It's called moral philosophy, also known as ethics. Some philosophers like to separate ethics and morality, but just in like a layman's fashion, ethics and morality are interchangeable. Within morality, there are different frameworks. It means so like systems of how one determines what is good and bad. Now, within these systems, it folds in your personal values and views, and that's where you start to make decisions from. So, some light examples: you've got what's called utilitarianism. This would be an ethical framework or a system of determining good and bad. Utilitarianism is what's called consequential ethics, I think, right? So they make decisions based on the outcomes of acts for the good for the greatest number of people and the least amount of suffering. That'd be utilitarianism. Then you've got egoism, right, which like produce people thinkers like Nietzsche, Ayn Rand, some other people. They make moral decisions based on what's best for themselves. Then you've got something called virtue ethics, which can be traced back to the Greeks. And they make decisions based on the person's character who's doing the act. Right? Within moral philosophy, within morals and ethics, there are various different systems of living and acting and judging situations. So you've got like normative ethics is what people ought to do in a situation. Descriptive ethics is what people actually do in any given situation. Applied ethics is judging moral quandaries, or like trolley problems and stuff like that. So it's if you come to a conversation about morality and your only frame of reference for the conversation of morality is God, e.g. religion, then you're within what's called divine command theory, one of the worst ethical frameworks for morality. That doesn't mean you can't have a robust understanding of morality, but chances are if you do have a robust understanding of morality, you'd be a mixture of some kind. You might blend utilitarianism with egoism or care, ethics of care, right? Most normies walking around on the planet don't even have this kind of understanding of what morality and ethics are. Hence why they think God is like the moral standard for ethics, right? But that's just not the case, right? They reduce it to something called subjectivity and objectivity, but there's a lot more to it than that. You've got like moral relativism, you've got moral realism and anti-realism. There's so much information within morals as a study that no like outsider to it could really have a good understanding of it without studying it. Do you know? So when you talk to me about morals from a position of like a just like religion, you're literally just demonstrating your ignorance on the topic of morals because you don't actually know what they are, how you determine them, where they come from, how much study has gone into it. You just think God says therefore, right? And that's very simplistic. Whoa. I think we should have enough points at least to go explore by now. Getting jumped, boy. Oh, he got me out of here. That's good. What's up, bro? There are way better books than the Bible to read, bro. I don't think like the average person should even pick up a religious text until like they've thought about other subjects that pertain to their material reality first. I think it's like it could be very detrimental to like your development as a person if you delve into religious things before you get understanding of basic stuff. Right. Just my opinion though. Hey, thanks for the subscribe. Appreciate it. Well, why don't you explain to me what the spirit is, Home Flanders? Flanders! Hey, thanks for follow on TikTok, see that? Bro spitting philosophers right there. I don't think, well, it's a good thing that you said what and not who. I think humans come about from natural processes. Again, I'm not like, not dogmatic with my views on how the universe comes about, how humans come about. I simply just like say, look, this is the information that's available currently. You can go with what's studied and what's like substantiated, or you can go with what's believed and what's like mythologized about. It's up to you ultimately what you decide to pick. But I think like if you was leaning to more towards more reality, you'd go with what's well studied and documented, which is like the scientific view on how things come about. But yeah, I like talking about where humans come from and where the universe comes from is really just like it's interesting stuff, don't get me wrong, from a scientific point of view, but in a religious context it's more of a cope, because people can't substantiate the existence of their gods, so they look to the physical reality and try to ascribe the creation of all of this to their god as a proof for God, which they can't actually do, right? So it's really a cope on their behalf, if that makes sense. They can't prove their God exists. They can't prove their God made anything. You know, they don't understand the mechanisms in which an immaterial spirit would produce a physical material reality. Like, is beyond conjecture. Like, so yeah, if we were just like having a chat, like, oh, where do you think the world comes from, the universe comes from? Then it's interesting from that point of view. But if you're like literally determined to say that God is responsible for the universe and humans, it's just a massive cope. Because how could you ever prove that? You literally got that idea from another human. So it's kind of goofy. And again, like creationist myths have popped up in different places across the planet, but the most well believed one is from, well, it comes from the evolution of ancient Sumerian text, which is called the Creationist Story or the Creationist Tablet, as I put on the screen before. It's literally just people have just been updating that mythology as time has gone on. As I said, different regions of the world do have different ideas of how the world comes about, but it's just they can't compete with the explanatory power that science has, and they haven't been able to for hundreds of years. So it's really up to you. Since the invention of natural philosophy, they've not, like theology hasn't had the explanatory capability. Oh, that's a Ricky Gervais quote, isn't it, Red? I think no, I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true, Spooky. I think twerking is a very intelligent invention by women, actually. In the same way that like certain types of birds show their feathers and stuff where they're trying to mate, it's a very intelligent creation, actually. I wouldn't say it's goofy at all. It's showing they're healthy, vivacious. So I would say that. Like, the invention of twerking is very intelligent. What do you think? Joking, but I'm not. Yeah, but I say again, right? Not like, not to be too jargony about it, but if you was to invoke a kind of view or first principles, where did you get the idea of Godhead from in the first place? Per my hypothesis of humans inventing God in the three phases, it's accounted for there. But in terms of it actually existing as like an entity or a mind with the capacity to have any meaningful effect on reality, it is not accounted for from any point of view. So you've got to think about that. No, I don't think we did MC, but I don't rule it out as a possibility. Who's to say? Apparently, a black hole was like it's like its own little snow globe of a universe. That makes sense. You've not had a spiritual experience. Well, why don't you explain to me what a spiritual experience is? How is it? How do I differentiate it from a psychological experience? Why don't you do that? All right, I think we got enough points. Even a bit of surplus. Okay. Ah, bro, that doesn't make any sense. That don't make any damn sense, bro. You know that don't make any damn sense, right? It doesn't. All the things you're pointing to are psychological. So how again, how do you differentiate that from what you're describing as a spiritual experience? Right? The reason you have that vocabulary is because it pertains to your psychology. Or they conceptualize consciousness, right? We don't know what consciousness actually is. So explain that. Since we don't know what consciousness is, how are you assigning it to things? Right? We don't know. Right? That's why it's called the hard problem of consciousness. To say, ah, oh, science doesn't know, therefore God. Like, hope no one pulls me up on this. Like, what are you talking about? Am I right, guys? Am I right? I'll just play it, bro. Well, to be fair, like when you're using the word meditation GTG, right? It depends what culture you're coming from with that point of view. The westernized view of meditation is actually what's called a bastardized view. It's very commodified. Meditation from like an Eastern perspective means something different, you know. So it really depends. And again, is meditation something that is like, I was gonna say ubiquitous. Yeah, I shouldn't really stop using big words, right? But meditation isn't something that's tangible in terms of a practice like that. You can't account for someone else's inner world, someone else's mind, how it functions. You just assume their mind functions like yours because they have the same anatomy as you. So in terms of meditation as a practice, that's not actually a thing in that way. It's just like I forget there's like a term for it, and there's also different views on it. For instance, like some monks practice what's called like it's not rumination in a negative way, but they go over what are called koans. Koans are like philosophical problems, like that very short, pithy kind of statements, that philosophical problems that they just keep thinking about continuously. Some people view meditation as like a practice of focusing on your breath and your breathing. Some people would view meditation as like a practice of doing ritual, like, you know, running up the stairs, killing a guy, running back down the stairs, running upstairs, killing a guy, running, you know. There are different views on it. What's up, OM? No, I really do want to play golf though, but too young. Too young. Yeah, but that's another one of those westernized words that's thrown around, Colm, right? Mindfulness. Like, an AI will start telling you about mindfulness. AI doesn't even have a mind, right? So what does that actually mean? You know, that's the problem with it. It's one of those like things that have become commodified. It's like if you go like listen to some old Alan Watts kind of seminars, and he's talking about East consciousness meeting West consciousness and how they interpret things different. For instance, like one of those koans, well, I think it was originally a koan, Koan, right? Was about a monk and a Western student meeting, and the monk telling a Western student, you need to empty your cup in order to be able to fill it with new information, right? There you go. That's what I mean, Cole. There you bloody go, right? But it's I don't know that much about like Zen and Taoism. Right? I've probably read one book and I can't remember most of the stuff that's in it. To be fair, but lots of different people have different views and understanding of these things. So when, like, if you just get your average westernized person saying, yeah, I meditate, like, it's like, what do you really mean by that? You know, it's like, in the same way people try to fold Hinduism into a religion like the Abrahamics, that means they don't have an understanding of what Hinduism is from a cultural perspective, because it defines different philosophical frameworks within that cultural context, right? So in the same way, you borrowing one, like, key element from Taoism or Buddhism being meditation, you've taken it out of its cultural context and it's like philosophical grounding, and you're using it as something commodified from a Western view. These are big words to all to say, when someone not from that cultural background uses the idea or speaks about the idea of meditation, it's usually a colonization of that culture, in simple terms, right? Because you don't have the cultural context for what it is. You don't even really have the vocabulary language wise for what it is. But that's just an opinion. Right, so what should we do? I think I wasted those points, you know.
Ashen One, may the flames guide thee.
I mean, it'd be good to see. It'd be good to know. Right. I think it's too late though, because religion. So, like, if you look up something called Christendom, it's literally the period of time which started in the 4th century and ended in 20th century, of Christianity and politics or the state being intertwined in Europe, right? Through, like, and the empire abroad, right? Africa, the New World, Australia. During that period of time, Christianity was fundamentally intertwined with politics at every level, as it is today, right? And in the Arab world, Islam functions like that. In, like, the I want to say, like, the Levantish region, Judaism has functioned like that. Even Judaism had a period of functioning like Christendom in Russia. Right? So at this point in history, religion and every other institution are too deeply entwined to ever see a true separation. You couldn't Hitler your way to it. You couldn't Stalin your way to it. Right? The best you could, and I'm saying this from a pragmatic point of view, because some people might have a better way of solving this, but you couldn't just get rid of religion. The best you could hope to do is help religious people reform religion from outside of it, if that makes sense. You couldn't, like, it's too deep. It's religion informs law, it informs education, it informs economics, it informs, like, manufacturing, it informs work, labor forces, all of these things religion is entwined in. So to see a world completely without it, you'd have to be able to Thanos snap it. And then the problem is, if you was to go the Stalinist kind of approach, the Maoist approach, all you do is push it underground and make it more like extreme, more fundamentalist. So I don't know, but I'd be interested to see what it's like. In a way, calm, yeah, that's true in a way. Alright, so where was we gonna go? There's this piece in this game which is supposed to be DLC, but every time I go there, it just doesn't seem to be anything we can actually do. Maybe it's there. What do you mean, yo-yo? Organically spread in what way? But you see, there's two sides to Ohm, right? As I, like, an observation, I don't know the best way to, like, really say this, right? But as in our modern times, religion is still used as a political vehicle for both the far left and the far right. The far left would weaponize what's called morality, right? Or, like, the being seen to be righteous and unrighteous, right? And the far right would weaponize what's called identity. traditional values and these kinds of things, right? Being part of the institutions. So they both make use of that. Now, if you look at like a well-developed country like England, we are, just forget about the political spectrum part of it, but as the country that produced the Church of England and like helped the Protestant Reformation and stuff like that, we are very much grounded in Christian view, right, of the world. But then if you look at a colonized poor country, right, I'll just pick one out of the bag, right, who are also very grounded in Christianity, they are both operating from a Christian view, but one is operating from the view of poor people being subjugated by other rich Christians, if that makes sense. Wait, what I'm trying to say is, right, there are Christian countries that are worse off economically, and there are Christian countries that are well off economically. But being well off economically as a country is purely based on the exploitation of resources and of people, being that the poor countries, which are also Christian, what allows them to remain in that place of suffering is their faiths, or ultimately most of the time, right? Not all the time, but that's what allows people to reconcile their suffering, is through their religious views. Okay, and you just do like a certain amount of studying, you will realize that they're both operating from the same system. Hence why when I said earlier on, there are only actually three religions, and they're the Abrahamic faiths, because they're literally produced for imperialism, to expand the rich country's empire, which foundation would be Christianity, into the new world or the third world, right, and exploit them, instill Christianity as an operating system to keep them exploited. Right? That is how the Abrahamic faiths have always functioned. The primary job of Muslims and Christians is to go out and gain more souls, right, to the fray, to gain more land, to gain more resources, to do missions, right? Judaism, which springs off Islam and Christianity, is fundamentally an ethnic or ethno religion, which produces an ethno state. Now trying to have a I think it's called a bi-state reality over there in the Middle East, right? So their thing isn't necessarily about bringing people into the fray. It's about reproducing and hoarding resources for their ethnicity, primarily for their tribe, which was originally the Israelites becoming the Jews. Okay, so you could say they are the only three religions really, but they are all ultimately imperialistic vehicles. Outside of them, you get indigenous practices which people tend to join of their own accord. They're not really evangelized to. Right? That makes sense. But that's more of a geopolitical point of view. Yeah, you're right. The poorer countries are more religious in terms of practicing it by the book, because, like I said, it helps them reconcile the suffering of why they are poor. Right? But make no mistake, England. Right. So there's a context to how England becomes a Christian country in the first place, right? It goes back to, like I said earlier on, Christendom, the Roman Empire. Christendom. I'll put it on the screen so you can get understanding for what it is. It's not Christiandom, it's Christendom. Christendom. Christendom refers to a historical era and geopolitical concept roughly 4th to the 20th century, where Christianity was the dominant, often state-enforced religious, social and political force in Europe. It signifies a union of the church and state, creating a unified Christian culture, distinct from the broader global Christian community. So, under Christendom, Christians suffer too. Catholics and Protestants both suffer under Christendom, right? And the same could be said about Islamic State and like Zionism for the Jews, right? Under these systems of religion meets politics, known as theocracy, people within the faiths suffer too. But the context of how UK, or this is before the UK, England becomes a Christian country is through the Roman Empire and the evangelism of Rome. They had popes, or what's called a sacerdotal class, which would be your priests, your like popes, whatever they are, all the guys that have like clergy kind of titles. They would go out
on missions, missionaries, and evangelize people. But how they would do it is they would kiss up to the mercantile class, which is the tradesmen, the people who sell stuff, and the aristocracy, which is like the lords and the dukes and stuff like that, and the monarchy, the kings and queens. Okay, England becomes a Christian country due to this. I can't remember which pope it was who came to England and evangelized or converted the king, the soon-to-be king. But they converted that king, and that king went on to be responsible for unifying England into one kingdom. Right? Prior to that, there was like Mercia up north and all these kinds of places. Right? Different kingdoms doing their own thing. You had Nordics, you had Anglos, you had Anglos, Germans, Germanics, Celtic people, original Britons. There was a bunch of different people, Romans moving about of waves of invasion on the country. But the country becomes Christian because the king becomes Christian, and under the king, all of his subjects must capitulate to his views. Right? Same thing as the mercantile class, same thing as the lords or the aristocracy. So if you're just a serf who works the land of a lord, if the lord becomes Christian, his servants and serfs must become Christians too. If the aristocracy become Christian, so like if the monarchy become Christian, so alike, right? So that's the context for England becoming a Christian country. But through that Christendom, many indigenous people across Europe suffered too, right? Because there was crazy abuses of power by the Roman Catholic Church and the sacerdotal class. The people, vast majority of people during this period of time, I want to say a good 90% of the population of the planet was illiterate. They couldn't read Latin. They could barely even read and write their own cultural native languages, right? So when the Bible arrives on England or the British Isles, the Britons, the Celtics, the Romans, the Scandinavians, the Norse, the Germans, all the mixtures of people, these melting pots in these different settlements, they barely had access to the actual text itself. They had what's called religious communicators. You know, like you have science communicators today. They had people who come and set themselves up in their community, same way they done it in Africa, like as a process of colonization through conversion. And they preach the gospel to the people on the ground, the serfs and the workers. But the serfs and the workers cannot read and write. They cannot have access to the Bible itself. In fact, lots of people got killed for trying to translate the Bible into English. Right? It wasn't until like 15 something that the Bible was translated into English, like layman's English, like we can read it, right? That's the context for England becoming a Christian country. Now, Empire, the Roman Empire does its thing, and then like hundreds of years later, the British Empire does its thing. And the British Empire is kind of like, you know, like the abused carries out the abuse, right? Hurt people. The British Empire goes about the world practicing the same tactics as the Roman Empire through the vehicle as Christendom and Christianity, right? Not just them, but there's a big component of it, sorry. So when this is all about the conversation you're saying about there being poorer countries who are more religious. The reason they end up religious is through this same process, right? Of the British Empire going over through Christendom and through their own like capitalistic exploits, landing on a mass, converting people through religion, establishing what's called a buffer class. So it would be like soldiers and police officers and a few of what you would call the bourgeoisie natives. They educate them in their religion and in their politics, and then they set up a governance over them. Then they become religious under that system. And then as the empire extracts resources and money out of the country, they still get to maintain their religious views because that's the generations that come after. So if I convert you and your granddad, your grandchildren will probably be the same religion, but they will also be subjects of the empire. Hence why you can have a Christian country which is rich from the resources that is extracted, dominating a now Christian country which is poor. That's how it happens, right? So there's context to it. Alright, anyways. Oh, that guy's definitely gonna kill me. What? He's attacking me already. What the hell? I can't even look on. I'm dead. Oh yeah, I'm hella weak. I should have put some strength up. I don't know what I was thinking. Oof. He is relentless. This is just a random enemy, you know. It's not even a boss. It's just a random enemy. What's up, Dharma? Why do I keep getting the language symbol? You guys sending an emote or something, or is it translating the stream into your language? Where on the map am I, or is my character? So why didn't you explain to me how the world comes about? I'm pretty sure you're well educated on that. Thanks for the follow, Dylan. Says a clipper. Right. Rude. Terms of value exchange. You don't actually offer much to the world. Oh, thanks for the follow. Another Dylan. Yes, DS3. Dylan! You son of a bitch! Hopefully you get the reference. Hey! Hey, thanks for the follow, David. Hell's not real, bro. Again, if you're on a vertical stream, you need to come over to the main channel, which is Culture Crack, or the TikTok, which is Set West 10. The big channel is Culture Crack. It's not doing so big in the algorithm currently, you know, like politics and all that. But I have been like periodically putting visual aids on the screen that help when I'm explaining these things, and you've not been seeing them because you're on the vertical YouTube. So you need to come to the main YouTube or the TikTok. The main should be in the pinned comment. So why hell isn't actually a real place based on how you're describing it? The word hell is a modern English Bible translation. In modern English Bible translations, is considered a mistranslation, or more accurately, a conflation of four distinct unrelated terms: Sheol, Hades, Gehenna, and Tartarus. Basically, they folded these four distinct places into one concept that you now know as hell. Various depictions through art and through literature have been produced prior, or it's not prior, like post the Bible, that help contribute to this view of hell, in the same way various pieces of art and literature have contributed to the view of heaven, you know, like the various angels like seraphim and all these kinds of things, right? Clouds and harps, and the same thing has happened through literature and like art for both heaven and hell. But hell, as found in the King James Version of the Bible, is actually a mistranslation, a conflation of Hebrew and Greek. But the actual history of the New Testament was devised to bridge the Hebrew world and the Greek world anyway. Okay, so that's context. So the word hell is a modern English. The word hell in modern English Bible translation is considered a mistranslation, or more accurately, a conflation of four distinct unrelated terms: Sheol, Hades, Gehenna, and Tartarus, into one concept. Early translations, including the King James Bible, used hell to represent these terms, which originally meant the grave, the underworld, and a place of destruction, or the abode of the dead, rather than a place of eternal torment. Right? If you know anything about how religion and culture works, people add doctrines, hermeneutics, and interpretations to religious views. They become influential, and then other people take on those views and perpetuate them into the future. So there are various things that are explicitly written in the Bible that people take to mean something different than what it explicitly says itself. Okay. So the definition of the four realms that make up what you know to be hell are on the screen. Sheol, Hebrew, occurs 65 plus times in the Old Testament, referring to the grave, pit, or the abode of the dead, where all people go, not specifically a place of punishment. Hades, from Greece. The Greek equivalent to Sheol in the New Testament, representing the realm of the dead or the grave. Gehenna, Greek, a literal physical location outside of Jerusalem, the valley of Hinnom, where trash was burned. Jesus, you know, like there's this Jewish thing, like you'll boil in a pit of feces, kind of thing, right? Jesus used this term metaphorically to describe destruction, not a fiery underworld. Again, a fiery underworld is a later depiction. Tartarus, Greek, used once in the New Testament, 2 Peter 2 to 4, to describe a temporary prison for fallen angels rooted in Greek mythology. Right? So, hell, as you're talking about it, just like the word, it's not actually biblically a thing. 9 circles, that's all. Yeah, that's all Dante. That's Milton. Again, later works of literature that aren't really part of the canon at all. Alright. This guy gonna jump me, boy.
I've seen your kind.
Yeah, Daemon.
Time and
A
time
Daemon and a Philemon. Interesting
Every
stuff.
clean man must be caught.
Bro,
Every
look on.
secret must be unearthed. Such is the conceit of the self-proclaimed
Dead.
seeker of truth. But in you, you left the stomach for the agony that you'll bring upon yourself.
Oh, he's spitting. Yeah, I think we should put up strength instead of all that endurance. Oh, it's 2. Ah. Stun him at least. How many times can he do that? Oh, he's on smoke. Got his ass. Contraption key.
Failed you. Lady Elfrida.
Who said there's no such thing as right and wrong? Like, you guys have a very primary school view of the world. It's quite sad. It's like I don't have a favourite football club, but it's been a while since I've actually been into football like that. It's been a very long time, actually. This game is Dark Souls 3. Thanks for the follow, Scorcharius. Do you think we should go back to the fire thing first? This area's got so much Bloodborne in it. How are we doing on sound, by the way? Can you guys hear the game well enough? Was it just bare breath for you? Test.
I believe I feel the scent of ash upon thee. Thou art the one of whom Uncle Gale spoke, the one to show me flame. 'Tis good. When this is done, may I return. The door is open thanks to thee. 'Tis good. I'll head off to paint. I promised Uncle Gale I would.
I think that's a super oversimplification, the hemp, to be
When
fair.
this is done, may I return. The door is open thanks to thee. 'Tis good. I'll head off to paint. I promised Uncle Gale I would.
Yeah, I know, like, some people really don't like the idea of nuance, but I really do personally hold that you have to graduate beyond the dualistic way of viewing the world, right? This whole above, below, black and white kind of approach. It's not how reality is. Reality has never been this way. Like, human minds have a tendency to compartmentalize things in that way, but the reality is always way deeper, way more nuanced than just black and white. Good versus bad, you know. Just like constantly looking for dichotomies, you know. What is the universal truth in your parts? Good point. I know. Definitely smelling poo particles there. That's what we do now. What did I say about right and wrong? I never said there was no such thing as right and wrong at any point in this conversation. Doesn't even sound like something I would say.
'Tis good. When
I just don't think he was listening. No, I don't think that. Don't get me wrong. That wasn't intended to be an insult. Like, it's just. I think there's something called Mechaism. I forget how to pronounce it, right? But it was an ancient view that was part of the early versions of Christianity as well. The dualistic framework, in that way, pertains to Zoroastrianism too. A lot of like, I wouldn't really say it's true metaphysical conversations, but it's like more pseudo metaphysical conversations where you get into like just cultish kind of thinking in plain terms. But that's not to say dichotomies don't exist, because they obviously do. There are things called true dichotomies, obviously. But the human mind has a tendency to just try and compartmentalize everything into simple, bite-sized things. It flattens reality, and it removes all nuance. Just like how we flatten people's identities, we do that with like very complex topics as well. If you actually think about what language is in terms of vocabulary, it's literally just sounds like that a voice box is making to point to things. But since we're pointing to things that are completely conceptual anyway, the realm of the thing itself that we're trying to point to with language isn't even tangible. It's completely mind dependent. Right? So if you consider just that, there's never any true simplicity to it. Like, I know that sounds like very like stupid. Look, it's not even stupid. It just sounds like woo woo. Us creating a vocabulary to point to something is us attempting to simplify reality into something manageable, but reality is never simple and manageable. Like, that's all I'm trying to say. But it's not to say there aren't true dichotomies, because there are, right? But it's just that we fall back to that. Like, it's this versus that, this or that, and it's not to be all middle of the roadish, but it's clearly not always this and that. Alright, back where we started. Yeah, so are you saying there's only one moral compass, or are there things that contribute towards a moral compass individually, or for individuals? what I would say is, like, even if I was to buy into determinism, I'd still say you're ultimately like the moral agent. Every individual is their own moral agent. So in terms of being your own moral agent, then yeah, you do have a moral compass. But like from like a pop psychology view, your nature and nurture are things that contribute to that moral compass. Your actual physical material realities, your society, the information you've ingested growing up, all contribute to that moral compass. Hence why at the beginning of the conversation I made it very clear. The reason a study or subject like moral philosophy exists is because it does vary that widely in different frameworks of how to approach things. Nah, it's just a game stream where we chat, so follow me on TikTok if you want. SetWest10 on TikTok. Might go live on phone sometimes. I do have another channel I was going to use specifically for call-ins, but it's too much effort. Managing this on its own is hard enough. Yeah, I never said right or wrong doesn't exist. Right? So there's again nuance applied as much as people hate it. Right? There was a guy called Wittgenstein. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce the name. Wittgenstein. Right? One of his most like famous philosophical like offerings is the idea of formal language games, right? Just in simplified layman terms, you don't say like acting as if I'm beyond the layman because I'm not, right? Is that within certain systems, the language only applies to that system. So for instance, in a formalized process like mathematics, arithmetic, 1 + 1 = 2 would give you a right or wrong answer. 2 being the right answer, of course, right? Anything other than that would be the wrong answer, but that's because you're working within the framework or the system of that language specifically. But if you was to assign different values to 1 and assign different values to 1, the plus sign, another 1 and a 2, so all of them represent different things to what they basically represent, or like in a basic arithmetic, 1 + 1 may not equal 2. That means you're applying different language to that system, right? So in that system, 1 + 1 would not equal 2. In the same way you're trying to look at right and wrong, right? Right and wrong only applies in a spectrum of different situations. So the language that you're using in terms of right and wrong only pertains to your ethical system of how you're judging things, unless it's in a formalized process that's agreed upon, e.g. basic arithmetic, addition. That's a formalized process that's agreed upon, right? So within that formalized process that's agreed upon, 1 + 1 will equal 2. Outside of that formalized process that no one's agreed upon, right and wrong is completely dependent on your views, on what it is you're interacting with, what system you're working by. I know I've made that more like languagey than necessary, but I'm not saying that right and wrong doesn't exist. That's not what I'm saying. The game is Dark Souls 3. Yeah, I did beat around the bush to explain that, but in simple terms, outside of formalized processes, there are no objective truths, right? Outside of formalized processes, things that have already agreed upon processes and language, there are no objective truths outside of those things. Yeah, I would agree. Even though I would agree with you about that fearless, right? It doesn't mean it's true, right? That would be both of our subjective views. Whether I'm coming from a utilitarian point of view and you're coming from an egoist point of view. Us agreeing on a matter doesn't make it objectively true. Do you get the point, right? Just because we agree on something or disagree about a specific thing, it doesn't make that objectively true. No, it's Dark Souls 3. I'm not playing it very well though. Just getting jumped. Damn. Ooh. But now come down. Oh, I'm dead. Damn it. Come on, just get one out of the way. That's it. You little shit. There is truth. I literally just explained that. Like, if you was using classic logic, right, that would provide you with truths. There are, it could be my fault for not explaining what I mean properly. You could, like, so you could be a rationalist, or you could be an empiricist. I think a rationalist is someone who thinks you can arrive at these kinds of truths simply by reasoning. An empiricist is someone who wants to be able to measure externalities to arrive at truths. But even those two, like, aren't even, like, limits in both directions. There's still more beyond both. Yeah, what would be the sufficient evidence, though? I'd be interested in it. Personally, like, again, like, on that same note of empiricism, there is a minimal criteria I think it would need to meet. Uh-oh. We're in trouble down here, boy. What is doing that, then? Is it him? Is he tough like that? No, it's not him. No! It's close. Oh, wow. What? There's two! No, they dropped me, boy. No way! Yo, the zoom is the enemy. Get out of here. That's good. If I made you think, then I mean, at least I've achieved, like, one of the goals of the stream. It's good. No, this is Dark Souls. Oh, he can do it from anywhere. Who is doing it? Apparently, I don't need to be in its sight for it to do it either. It's a bit scary. So which type of god are you explaining with logic? You've got to be very specific. There are some types of gods that compel logical contradictions just by how they're defined. So you'd have to be very specific. And to be frank with you, the only type of god concepts that you could offer like a really sound syllogism for would be philosophical god concepts, not necessarily classic theology gods. Right, be right back. I'll use the toilet, put on a kettle. Hope you guys are having a good morning. It's only 9:30, damn it. My bad, chat. Had to do some human stuff. So who is Karl Marx? You still in the chat, bro? Yeah, it's intelligent design and all that demands that, you know, have excretions. Okay. I need to eat, sleep, shit, and piss. And for some reason, your God designed it so that humans need to consume life in order to sustain life. Who figured? Doesn't seem very harmonious to me. But yes, I have to do human stuff every now and again. Hey, appreciate you, J. Man. Make sure you drop a subscribe. So that's a good point, Blue Muffin, right? There's like a philosophical debate about whether maths is discovered or invented. Me personally, I think it's a bit of both. I think the language of mathematics is 100% invented because you cannot have, like, put it this way, mathematics is the description of physical realities using equations and like other mathematical tools. But in order to make use of these tools, we have to devise the vocabulary for it. For instance, there are ancient versions of maths that people have just left behind because they're not good. Right? The old ways of doing maths. So from that point of view, yes, humans have to devise the vocabulary and the language to make use of the tools. But from a different point of view, you could argue things like, I don't know if the right way to say it is like things have intrinsic values in terms of maths, like properties and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean that's a bit beyond my level of thinking currently, to be honest with you. But in terms of my view, is maths and physics are things we devised to describe our reality. So, what does that entail? Like, what does that even mean, CF? That doesn't point to anything, bro. What you're doing is called question begging. You can't, for instance, you can't presuppose your God exists. You don't know the mechanisms in which your God would use to produce anything, create anything. Bro. So, like, you're just assuming creation in your statements. You're assuming there's a creator in every statement you're making, but you're not actually proving it in any sensible way. You know? I mean, yeah, it would be a bit weird, no home, but then again, like, well, religions mostly are weird because they're coming from a culture of people with practices and ideals and values, like, unique to that culture. So to me and you, that'd be a bit weird. If we're not coming from, like, a patriarchal theocracy, those kinds of views would be weird to us. But if you live in a patriarchal theocracy, those things are normalized where they are, so it would make sense that they'd be promised like 72 virgins or some shit like that. That's the type of shit you promise to an idiot that you're about to send off to die. Do you know, that makes sense? So they'd probably buy it. But in real terms, I mean, why would you want that? Doesn't actually make sense. But that's not like an attack. It's just a critique on a comment that someone gave. Alright, so why don't you tell me how that would make sense, Azirium? How can we be sure that's the case? 72 Bergens. Yeah, I know, my accent's sometimes bad. I've got block those as well. How are we going to get back those points that I've just lost though? Why would you want 72 versions, bro? That doesn't even make sense. Probably wouldn't even want one version to be honest with you. Like, that's a bit weird. It's like again, like the idea of purity culture is actually like so to simplify it, it's like an inversion. So it's truly a perversion in terrible way. There are perversions that literally just mean deviation from the normality, right? But the idea of purity and purity surrounding virginity is actually a warped view on reality. It doesn't come from a good place. So when you actually examine it from that point of view, it's very suspicious. And then the allegations that surround like the main prophet and some things that are okayed, it makes it even more dubious. So you got to be careful. That's the way I would put it in the most respectful way possible. But the idea of like holding up virginity as this thing of purity is actually a perversion of humanity. It's not a thing. And even the idea, I think, I forget what it's called, right? It begins with a H. Right? Even the idea of bleeding, right, during coitus is also a perversion, because they don't all not all women experience bleeding. So the idea of virginity itself is not actually a thing, it's something devised. Those are the kinds of shit you got to think about. Right? But like I said, in the cultural context of the people who's producing those ideas, maybe it makes sense to them. But in like 2026, where we live, it doesn't really make sense. Is that? Ooh, what was that? Oh, I thought it was an emoji. Nah, not played Wukong. Yeah, but ain't a hadith like an additional doctrine? It's not actually like the primary text. So that'd be like a church father writing a book that's next to like a book based on this book kind of thing. I don't think maybe in the future I'll give it a try, David. So how would I know that's true? Deepak, how do I say your name, bro? Deepak. How would I know I will know God in my last breath? How can I know that's true? In it, no homie. No home says that's greedy as hell. 72 virgins, bro. It's weird as hell. Sausage, that's rude as fuck, man. Oh my god, excuse my language. Poor sheep. Cow, I agree. I agree with the first statement. The second statement about it being control, I'm coming to understand it a bit more as that, but I still offer like a charitable interpretation of religion too, because again, as per my hypothesis, as I'll keep saying, of humans inventing God, the reasons are primarily innocent, right? But what people go on to do with it can be nefarious. So from that point of view, you could say religion then does become a tool of control, but like the pillars of religion, being that like the theological parts of it, came from an innocent place. But then when men start to twist it for their own desires and needs, then yeah, it can be a bit wicked. I don't think. What's up, Baston? I don't think Jesus Christ as described in the New Testament is real. No, I think that's largely myth. What's called mythicism. Now, again, if I was being charitable in terms of my interpretation of Christianity, I could give you that there's a guy called Yeshua bin Joseph or something like that, a Bronze Age / Iron Age Judaic priest. Wow, they jumped me, boy. But that guy is not the same guy you're talking about as Jesus Christ in the Bible, part of the triune configuration. That guy was just like an ideologue, a normal, like politically active Hebrew. The guy you're talking about is Jesus Christ in the New Testament. That's like a superhero. Hey, thank you for the gifts, bro. Appreciate that, both of you. What kind of sausage? Yeah, it's true. But I don't. They're not Menino, really and truly, Albert, right? Because that's like that shattered the illusion. So they're not really meant to know. They're just supposed to like point to the popular ideas surrounding Jesus. But again, as like a character written to serve a purpose, to tell a story, or to impart knowledge, Jesus does a great job of that. Or even as like just in literature terms, the Bible is actually a great piece of work. Right? It's a work of art in terms of its writing. But the realities of the things that people are led to believe are just wholly untrue most of the time. Oh, because I'm concerned about your well-being, H Prime, that's why. I'm so dead. Ooh, got one little hit of me. Hey, Aaron, that didn't even make any sense, bro. This is on Good Friday. No, it's on Fish Friday, actually. Now, what if I'm Roman? Shouldn't I be able to celebrate from a Roman's perspective? What if I'm Jewish? Shouldn't I be able to celebrate from a Jewish perspective? What are you trying to say? Are you saying, like, this week is exclusively your week? It's like saying, I can't eat food because you're fasting. What's it got to do with me? Has nothing to do with me at all. So, Kings, how do you know? How do you know that? And how do you know that's true? I don't believe in any religion, bro. No, it didn't, actually. Right? If you speak to a Jew, right, a practicing Jew, they will tell you the Old Testament does not prophesy of Jesus Christ. The Jews believe the Messiah is yet to come. Okay, so from their perspective, they would call Jesus a false Messiah. That's not a good thing to be called. And again, you're probably not understanding the historical context of how the New Testament was put together anyway.
The door is open thanks to thee.
Oh, that sucks. You guys think the Earth is flat? That sucks for you. So, how do you guys feel about the Artemis? How do you feel about that? Again, karma is how you might be using it is probably wrong. Karma is another thing that's bastardized by the Western world. Karma was like a whole religious system unto itself. Or like more philosophical, but yeah, it's its own system. It's not just literally a transactional element of the universe. Karma was never that. Yeah, that's what the story says, Brian, but how true is the story? I'm drinking coffee, by the way, in case you was wondering. Do you know, Drenched, I'm not that aware of what's going on over that side of the world, to be fair with you. Is Kash Patel is the director of FBI, I think? I'm not very in the loop. What's up, bro? Not all of it was destroyed. Some of it's still very much alive. Not all of it was destroyed, but again, there's a resurgence in indigenous practices across the world. You've got like Turkism. You got Pan-Asianism. You got Pan-Africanism, like Pan-Europeanism. So like lots of people are actually reaching back to their original ancestors' ideas and cultures to try and get understanding of who they are, where they come from. So it didn't all die, although like the colonialism was explicitly brutal and like terrible in Africa. Like every continent and groups of people have gone through their own versions of it as well. Africa's became the most recent, and the UN has just said the worst atrocity to humanity, mostly because of the abuses and the direct directly being about race, whereas in Europe it was people of the same skin color who were most famous to each other. But yeah, the indigenous practices haven't completely disappeared. They're probably a lot more watered down than they used to be, but they're still out there. Even India, like, cause I forget. Yeah. So, not Talmud, damn it. They're called again. Tamil people? Fuck. Tamils, right. So yeah, I worked with this guy who was Tamil Indian one time, right? And he explained to me like the whole history of his peoples and what went down in India. Even India, as you understand it today, before that it was called Indus Valley, right? And that accounted for a large amount of that region of the world. One of the oldest civilizations as well. But even India today is very like culturally colonized. Even though Hindu practices and temples and stuff like that still exist, it's not in its purest form as it was. There was a group of people called the Tamil people who like done a lot of groundwork in that region of the world, philosophically and religiously as well, and linguistically. A lot of them got wiped out and moved about and like absorbed through that period of colonization and people mixing and mingling. But yeah, like there are pockets in every part of the world that are going back to their traditional understanding of nature, of life itself. There are pockets in every continent. But there are older religions that are lost in India too. What do you mean by island? Oh, I see what you mean in terms of colonization. Kind of. The Irish and the English, yeah, is an interesting history, but the Celts and the Brits are fundamentally the same peoples. It's more of actually, some people might argue it's an ethnicity difference, but I would, from like an outsider's perspective, look at it more as a cultural difference. But some might argue actually Irish is a different ethnicity to English, even though they're the same lands primarily. Yeah, England did they effed over Wales and Ireland and Scotland actually, and the various other kingdoms that were on the mainland. But they didn't, like, again, I don't think when I'm not a historian, just to be clear, I have very like sparse bits of information from here and there. But I think at that point where England is described as effing over the Irish and the Scottish and the Welsh, at that point they would have all been intermingled with Germans, Romans, Scandinavians. So it wouldn't just been like primarily Britons, right? They're like indigenous group for the island. So I don't think it would really be them. It'd be a mixture of all these empires at that point, which would be described as Englishmen. Polish people as well. Like a lot of Eastern Europe ended up on the British Isles. Still are. Think about the word slavery, where that even comes from. It's the Slavics, and the Slavics being enslaved by the Eastern world. Yeah, in a way. But the minute they got their white card, they were right along with the English, and you can see them doing it today. So, not to say I don't have sympathy for their history, but I don't have sympathy for their modern actions in any way. Yep. Again, I'm not well educated on the history of India. India actually, right? One time a guy I was working with, he gave me a bunch of books about but just like Indian culture, bro. Some really interesting stuff, but I've never actually opened them up. I get to show you something. So yeah, like one time, like this guy I used to work with. So actually, interestingly enough, like he was like low key a part of a political movement that was happening over in Bangladesh, right? Like so they their politics is very interesting. Right? It's a lot to get into, but anyways, they had a political movement that they're governing from England over in Bangladesh, right? But this guy basically he come to work one day and he had a boot full of books, right? He was like, just have a look if you want any, take some, right? And honestly, I still haven't actually gone through them, but here are some of the books that I took that day, right? So there's this one. It's called Gender and Labour in India. The Kamins of Eastern Coal Mines, 1900 to 1940. Right? Interesting book. Security issues in South Asia, domestic and external sources of threats to security. Right? So they've got their like they've been having their shit going on. Excuse my French, right? A New Renaissance by Sibnarayan Ray. Right. And again, I'll be honest with you, like barely open these books. Empire into Commonwealth. Right. Oh, this is the English guy, but he was amongst those books. Right. So they've been like putting in work over there in terms of understanding the like colonial backdraft of you or the issues coming off the back of it. Like Indians are very smart. Like politics and how people are portrayed in the world is one thing on its own, like ethnicity, racism and all that portrays people in a certain way, but in terms of actual literature and offerings to the world and like political analysis, they've been putting in work, bro. It's under the radar, but it's because it's like a lot of it is in Urdu and other languages and stuff like that that we don't really get an understanding of it. But in terms of them capturing the colonial struggle, like, they've been putting in work, bro. So books for you to think about. And here are two books for the Eastern European side of the world that you should consider, right? Again, not got to them yet, but I'm gonna eventually. So you got The Fall of Yugoslavia by Misha Glenny. Right? There's one there. If you can actually see that. Fall of Yugoslavia by Misha Glenny. The Balkans, Nationalism, War and the Greater Powers by the same author. This one's a big, thick one. So this should be like an interesting capture, like a geopolitical analysis and capture of history of from that Balkan point of view, Yugoslavia, Eastern Europe. Okay. So, as I was alluded to earlier on with the kind of like the pan movements popping up everywhere across the world. Everyone is writing their own literature about their own experience of colonization, you know, of war and all of the blowback from these things, basically. So it's not us. We're the latest and the worst of it, but they're all experiencing it, even though they've participated in it too, right? So it's kind of funny to think about it from that point of view. So like when you see like a person of like a white color skin, right, have these obtrusive views of people of other skin colors, and then having in the back of your mind that they don't actually know their own history of how they exist in the world, it's kind of funny, right? So it's like, you really don't know who you are, do you? So that's a different. It's a funny conversation, but anyways. Yeah, them books are dusty. I gotta wash my hands now. Anyways. But yeah, there's another argument for you. Well, the case of your God not existing. If he did exist, why would he allow such atrocities to occur? A lot of them happening on his behalf too. So you think a guy might be like, actually, I didn't say that. Don't do that. But nope, nothing. What do you mean, Doctor 6124? What do you mean by that? What's up, Yakub? Yep. So I've read about that we were talking about is shit. This was during my lifetime. A war in Bosnia, right? So I read about that in a book called Talk of the Devil, where this Italian reporter talks to like these like dethroned kind of, if you will, like dictators in different countries. Right? One of them, it's actually, I think, no, that's, yeah, it's a man and a woman, the politicians who are primarily responsible for that atrocity in Bosnia, I think, right? But yes, I've read about that. Right, that happened during my lifetime. As a kid, I remember my older sister. It was like a buddy system in the school that she went to, and it was her job to take care of a Bosnian Muslim girl, right, a white girl who was Muslim. So we used to play out and shit. So that happened during my lifetime. That was one of the worst like ethnic / religious genocides in the 90s, right? And, like, so it's, yeah, it's real. It's real. Like, people been effing each other over for in the name of all kinds of stupid shit, right? There's a lot of great happened during that as well. A lot. Right? I know it's dark to say, but that was like one of the primary like uses of aggression that the Eastern Europeans acted out, which was kind of fucked up. But yeah, there've been other interesting like revolts and revolutions in that period, in that part of the world too, but most of it's pretty dark shit. But the more you know, right? I don't think that's true, right? Why would you think it obeys anything? You know, they're like, so I'm talking to you, Dennis, right? There's what's called descriptive laws and there's prescriptive laws. What you're describing is descriptive laws, right? So the universe doesn't obey anything. It does what it does, and we try our best to describe it. And our descriptions are only based on what we can observe and what we can calculate, so that could change at any time. So it doesn't obey anything from that point of view. And the only thing that obeys laws is humans, which are prescriptive laws or oughts. Well, I mean, look, put it this way, right? If you could think about inventing something, a service or a product that helps humans, but it's how you go about doing that, right? What's it gonna take for you to like gain or garner the resources to produce that thing? That on its own isn't inherently bad and exploitative. It's how you go about it. Right? So to like to simplify it into, oh, they're just trying to make the world a better place, be disingenuous but a little bit warped at the same time. What does it mean to make the world a better place? Like, if you was to say, again, can you really compare your cultural context and your background to someone else's and have a one-to-one correlation? You can't, right? So if you was to say, oh, like, we're coming over there to civilize you, and then someone were to do like a critical analysis of your actual ancestry, your history, your geography, everything that's happened, where you're coming from, and point out, actually, how is it possible for you to civilize anyone when like you're guilty of doing this, that, and the other, and you live in this way and that way? In the cultural context of, let's say, the Amazons, what is civilized in the Amazons and in the environment for the Amazons isn't the same as in Britain, isn't the same as in Spain, isn't the same as in France, any of the colonial powers, right? So when you take those things into context, that's like human hubris and ego. But the reality of imperialism was really just to spread empire, extract resources, and create a labor force to enrich your own country. Religion being one of the vehicles to do that. Right? If you read Things Fall Apart, it's a very simplified version of how you install religion to like gain access to the land and the people. Okay, but just simply coming out of a product and a service doesn't necessarily entail that same type of imperialistic activity. So I don't know if that would be the same. What's up, uncle? How you doing, bro? Thank you for the likes. Not actual uncle as far as I know, but that is your name. Big up to you, bro. What's up, Dropkick? Funguses are real god, maybe. Ah, I didn't put the ring on. Probably got no chance against this guy yet. But oh my lord. Yeah, we need to go level up. I don't know. You could use the idea of fruits of the spirit as like an internal critique. You wouldn't actually have to believe in the framework of Christianity to make use of it. Kamehameha. Got me. I think I need to trade in for a magic build or something, maybe. All this sword and shield ain't cutting it. Thanks for follow. I haven't even got into second phase yet. Yeah, we better go back mining points, bro. Oh yeah, what you're talking about is called the colonial boomerang DR6, right? Humans innately want to travel anyway, right? As the type of humans we are, Homo sapiens, we only survived by migrating. That's what we do. We move around in order to survive. So that would happen anyway. But so like moving around for exploration and then moving around to extract resources from people is different, you know? So but what you're talking about of like people from the Commonwealth wanting to move to the countries, the empires that control their like land in their region, is called a colonial boomerang. So it makes sense. And in fact, they're well within their rights to not extort but extract resources in kind for what's happened to them and their lands. There would be different opportunities, different realities had it not been for colonization and imperialism, right? So they're like from a moral standpoint, they're well within their rights to want to come and live in the country that's actually extracted so many centuries of resources from their land. That's why some people like, now there's an extreme to that, don't get me wrong, right, which becomes an incursion. It's like there's people that be like, oh yeah, look what you guys did to this region of the world, so what we're going to do is we're going to come and take over your country through, like, you know, not nefarious means, but yeah, we're going to embed ourselves into the system and we're going to slowly erode the system and turn it into the country that we want it to be. Now that could be considered an incursion in a certain way, right, if that's the right way to use the word. But most people who are coming from Commonwealth countries aren't coming in that capacity. The media might trump up in that way to make it seem like they're invaders, but there's only like a subset group of people who think like that. And there's certain people. But that's my bias. It'd be like saying, say your dad worked for a company for 8 years of his life and all of your house savings and all of your food for that period of time went into the company, and your dad like never saw a penny of it, and then one day the same boss of your dad says, oh, you know, like you can come work at our company if you want. You'd be like, well, why should I work at the company if my dad never got paid? And then the boss is like, oh, but we'll give you some of what your dad worked for, kind of thing. In a very simplistic view, it's kind of the same way. Or you'd be like, I'm going to come over there, right? Because that's where my dad worked, and all our fucking money went there, so I may as well go there and make use of the stuff that my dad built, kind of thing. Right? But that's not really a nuanced view. It's just an idea. I can't really say. I was born here, but my parents migrated here because of their parents. I don't think that's true, Dennis. I think fine-tuning is an anthropocentric point of view. So it holds humans. The fact that you live in a life-permitting universe is why you're saying that in the first place, right? And in fact, we also don't. I think it's called problem of causation or something like that. I can't remember. But we can't actually say for certain what difference reality would be if gravity was tweaked by 2%. Right? We can't actually say because we don't live in that reality. So all these things considered, the idea that the universe is intelligently designed or fine-tuned is an anthropocentric reading of reality. It's not necessarily what reality is saying to us. It's what we're interpreting reality to be. It's kind of like the old puddle analogy. There's a hole in the ground, rain falls in a hole. Let's anthropomorphize the rain. The rain has a mind and says, oh, because the ground hole fits me perfectly, it must have been made for me to exist in it. You are essentially having that same point of view about the world, or the universe being fine-tuned or intelligently designed. 100% or 100? Why should I think that, Lucid? Why should I think that? No, and again, probability is something that's statistic or like something. It's the realm of mathematics, put it that way, right? You can't really make good calls on probability without having the right sample size or access to the data set to be able to, calculate probabilities. You're just, with all due respect, Dennis, I don't know who you are, but I'm speaking like in general. You're just repeating some language that's been put together in a very convincing way, but you're not actually demonstrating the probabilities of what you yourself have calculated, what you know to be true. You need to have access to a certain amount of parameters to make any calculation on probability, and you don't really see that happening in theological circles, to be honest with you, bro. Not saying that like religious people don't work in science, but we're having a conversation about theology. Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. A third party country, it's the same it's like what I said earlier on about humans' nature wanting to explore, wanting to migrate, wanting to move for better, like greener pastures, right? If you have, if you have an understanding that like you're currently there aren't a lot of resources like available to you where you are, right? You have a certain capacity for intellect or for labor or whatever, and you can see over there are opportunities to make use of your intellect or your labor. You should go there, like just as on an individual basis. You should go where opportunities are best for you, right? Just as simple as that. So whether that's an English person saying, I like the idea of taking my resources to Spain and setting up in Spain, or I like the idea of taking my resources to Bali and setting up in Bali or Thailand or Africa, you know, it's exactly the same thing. The only difference is when you bring in the Commonwealth countries, they have a direct link to the nations in which they'll be migrating to. Right? They have like a dual kind of citizenship set up because of the colonial period. The colonial period is really just like a trick contract. These lands are controlled by us, but we write it so it seems we are the protectors of this land. Now, being the custodian of this land also means I have to be the custodian of the people of this land. So you've taken on, that's why it's called a colonial boomerang. You've taken on the responsibility of these people, given the history of your ancestors' actions. Right? If that makes sense. But if you're not from a Commonwealth country and you just want to move to America or England or whatever, it's just literally going where resources are best suited for you. That's all that is. You know, it's the same as anyone from England going somewhere else. But yeah. What are we talking about? Of course you can invent the Trinity. It's literally a human idea. It's a contradictory one as well. No, see, you having a view of superiority is something happening with you psychologically, right? And it points to something a bit, something you should examine a bit closer, right? Now, for instance, how can I give you like a very simplistic analogy? That's it. Alright, let's look at it from the opposite point of view, right? This may help you a bit, right? So let's think about the British Isles, right? We can produce a certain amount of food from our farming, a certain amount of resources, but the way Britain currently functions is a service-based economy, so we don't really produce products en masse anymore. I work in logistics, so I do see products move around, obviously, right? But if you think about the let's say the business plan of how Britain used to function, they literally had to, not just Britain, Spain, France, Germany, like Belgium, etc., right? It's Germany, whatever. Right? They all play a part in what I'm about to say, right? So if you're looking at it as greener pastures being superior, again, like I said, that's really something psychological that's happening with you in terms of how you view your identity, which is your own business, right? But if you're looking at it from this point of view, think about it like this. Because the British Isles and Spain and France, etc., exist in the capacity they exist in Europe, them needing to leave the European continent to go over to America, to go to Africa, to go to India, would be you saying that America, Africa, and India are all superior in terms of resources. Right? Using your own thinking, right? I don't think you want to say that. No? But I think the reason you're using the word superior is because you've got some personal hang-ups on what you've been taught. But in terms of land, right, look at how we live. We're an island surrounded by ocean. It's grey most of the time. We have very little resources in terms of rare metals, etc., clean waters and stuff like that. So from a resource point of view, what's actually on the land, America is superior, Africa is superior, Asia is superior to Europe, right? But each place has its own like pros and cons, doesn't it? So it's like you having that view is kind of warped in general because you're not thinking about the cultural context in which you exist and where other people exist in their countries. Right? But it's up to you how you want to view things. if you used to think about stopping all import trades just for a year in Britain, it means we couldn't get resources from anywhere else in the world. What would be the impact on the economy and how we currently function? Think about what we're seeing with oil currently. Now, we get some oil from Europe, the North Sea and all that kind of stuff as well, I think it's called. The connotations of what imperialism has left in its wake leaves actually a country like England very weak to the rest of the world. Or even European countries, essentially. Now, it's not to say they can't survive on their own, but only a very reduced population will be able to survive. And it'll be a lot of revolts for what's called like the proletariat class, people that are workers. They would be the least considered among all of the people, but they'd be the only people that can make the country work. So all of these things are considered. Again, in terms of superior workforces and resources, the other continents have us beat easily. So. Yes, no doubt about it, medieval. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying we don't have resources as well. Every land has something to offer, else there wouldn't be people there. Okay? But I'm just talking geopolitically. It wouldn't make sense to think in that way. Think about so there's this idea called the universal spirit, and it's kind of how we define mankind at certain periods of time. What's up, bro? What's up, Barry? Society is made up of that same kind of ideology. So whatever the governing ideology of the time is, the society will reflect those ideals and values, right? Those morals, those principles, whatever it may be. So at any given time, again, the idea of superior and inferior is wholly subjective unless based on like actual data. Okay? So whatever ideology is the vehicle of your society at the time will make all the difference, right? The ideology of the Victorian era isn't the same as the ideology of the Elizabethan era or whatever. Get the eras, right? But the society has a certain ideology at a certain periods of time, just like the ideology of society in 2026 isn't the same as it was in 1956. So from that point of view, the ideology that governs the society, the way it functions, is constantly shifting, changing and moving. You would say the ideology that allowed for colonialism and slavery wasn't a very good ideology, right? So that society at the time would have been dysfunctional. Just like the society prior to that, which was throwing feces in the street, in gutters, had child labor and all that, would have been a dysfunctional society. But in order for society to exist in the capacity it exists today, it must evolve. So it has to go through ideological change, and the actual people that exist within the land need to change too, right? So it is with the addition of all of these different people from different worlds and different offerings coming to Europe, which makes it an advanced society. If every continent and every country never left its landmass, they would be fucked, right? Every single country would be. Like mathematics is something that's cross-continental shared, language cross-continental shared, cross-continentally shared, philosophy, religion, science, right? All of these breakthroughs come from different people in different parts of the world. The invention of penicillin, right? All of these kinds of very key important events that happen in human history to allow us to survive come from the mixing of all these different people from different places. Okay? So at the snapshot you want to take of your society, at whatever time you decide to take it, you still have to consider the background information, which is the history. No society as we know it is completely self-contained. It's mixed. The resources are coming in and out, the people are coming in and out, the ideology is coming in and out. So like there's no like closed system of a country that we know about. The closest you could say is like those cargo cults. I don't think you'd want to exist in a cargo cult. No, I wouldn't say that's mainly just personal preference though. Moving, like think about how much it entails to just move to another town or another city, right? That's a big emotional change, right? It takes a lot of resources too. Now take that leap for language barrier, right? And a whole different system. That's a lot of bravery and like gearing up to do something like that. Now on the opposite end of that, just moving to another country, thinking about gearing up to go and colonize another country, right? Think about how much psychological turmoil that is. Okay, so it's nuance, right? Now I'm not saying that everyone should be pro like a universalist, like what's what they call it? Not progressive, but like pluralistic. I'm not saying everyone should be pro universalist, like pluralistic societies. Each individual has their reasons for having the ideologies that they hold, right? But the reality that we currently exist in, right, as Europeans or Americans or wherever we are in the world, is 100% informed by the history that comes before we exist. Okay? That history entails a lot of mixing of peoples and countries and resources. Always has, right? Since the Romans were visiting the Egyptians and etc, etc, etc. The Greeks too. Okay, back and forth information has always passed. The resources have always passed. It's just certain periods of time where things appear worse than others. But again, depends on your ideological lens, right? Could be an accelerationist. You're like, yeah, good. Fuck it all up. You could be like an ultra conservative. You're like, no, like we need tradition, we need stability. Like, it just depends on you, your view, really. But the reality is, people are gonna people. Like, no matter what era you plug yourself into. But that's a. I know I'm making it very like simplistic. But there's a lot more detail that should go into what we're discussing that I'm not really giving. Probably not even capable of giving, to be honest. Platonism. So what does that entail then? I've heard about it, but I don't know all the details. Oh, he's gonna swing! Oh, slick. Wonder if we can get some other flasks before we do this fight. Come on, let's get into phase 2 at least. Yikes! Yikes! Alright, we're cooked. Come on, he's phase 2. We've got to start using some buff items as well. I think that would help a lot. No, I'm cooked as the piano comes in as well. Jesus Christ. Oh, quick. Oh, it's free. And then a fourth. Damn it. Alright, I'll have to look for that one. Lightning. Oh, that's the annoying one. Damn it. Oh, it's a fourth. Nope. shit. It's hard to read him now. No, it's the end. So close. It's Dark Souls 3. So close. I didn't know that medieval. I didn't know that the Moors were the longest colonial power. Didn't know about that. I've heard about them, like controlling big part of Spain for a long time. Obviously, again, not to get too deep into like history, but these kinds of things you could argue are necessary in terms of things being brought to Europe. Like, yeah, let's not get too deep into it. Some people's feelings will get hurt. But yeah, it's just, that is a reality. Well, there's like an economic view on what materialism is, and there's a philosophical view on what materialism is. Materialism isn't a bad thing philosophically. Now, when you say someone is materialistic in like an economical sense, like they just love products and shit, yeah, that could be bad. But materialism in terms of like well, you could say socio-economical materialism, like a Marx kind of way, isn't necessarily a bad thing, because that's concerned with your primary reality, which is physical. So that's not a bad thing, but exploitation is obviously a bad thing. Me personally, I'm not completely sold on the whole socialist, communist view kind of thing. I think there's a space for a hybrid reality, which is like, I think it's called solidarism. And I think we're more likely to live in a hybrid of capitalism and communism than one or the other. As capitalism exists currently, it's not the same as it once was. Just like slavery becomes feudalism, feudalism becomes capitalism, they have to go in a trajectory. It's just the way reality seems to be going. But you're right, big companies are unscrupulous, but it's still people behind it, you know? People want the products, people work for the money, so it continues. So this is what people discuss as what's described as class consciousness, making people aware of where they stand societally and what that entails going forward. It's the only way you can really get those kind of changes. But yeah, it's not simple. Yep, that's true. Slavery is still happening today. In various different ways. Run, bro. Too late. Yikes. Hopefully you can hear me over this music and the like, sound effects. I forget it's loud. Oh. No, man. I swear I press circle. Hey. Oh, he doubled down. Nope, that's the 4. Dead. Oh, you beat this boss, then the DLC. Is that why I've not been able to make any progress? Ah, thanks for letting me know, Dropkick. Well, the guys on the vertical live stream are listening to a different audio configuration, so it might be bad for them. In some ways, BN, what reasons do you think Dark Souls 3 is better than Elden Ring? Because I can see in some ways. No, I haven't yet actually, Sven. I haven't. I'm still like maybe say 3/4 into an introductory philosophy book, so I'm like proper basic still. What are they? So I don't understand what you're saying by that, Dennis. That sounds like a kind of Pascal's wager stance. You would still be empty-handed anyways. So I don't get it. Don't get me wrong, I'm not telling you what you should believe or not believe, but this whole idea about, oh, everything will be revealed in death, this is like copium max. How can you know? I'm not telling you should be searching, like, again, human tendency is to search for certainty in any place we can find it, right? But this whole idea of, oh, we'll find out when we die, is just literally people passing a buck because they can't explain things while they're alive. If what we know death to be is the cessation of all bodily functions, then how would we have the ability to know anything after we die? This is all hope based, like no, you couldn't even really say theorized. Right? It's just ideas people have about what happens, but nothing substantial. But yeah, again, you believe based on the reality that's been imparted to you, if that makes sense, or what's been imparted to you during your existence. But as I point out many times, everyone that was ever born was born an atheist. From the moment somebody devised the concept of God, anybody who didn't have information about that God or belief in that God was an atheist. So your idea of belief in this context is literally just you saying, somebody told me this thing, and because of my cultural like inclinations, I'm going to hold on to this thing no matter what. Fine, right? I think the truth of that matter is more, it's about your identity than the reality of the thing that they told you to believe. Okay. At that point, that has way more to do with just your cultural existence than anything supernatural. I mean, so the thing is, DR, right? Values were never something that were agreed upon anyway. They're supposed to change. It's supposed to change over time, right? Values aren't something that's set in stone, like, primarily. Like, the core values that people hold primarily pertain to survival. That's something that's genetically coded. So let's say society as we understand it, it isn't like you could really describe society as a truce. It's not peace, it's a truce. It's saying, I won't attack you, you won't attack me, so I can get what I need done, and you can get what you need done. Right? But the reality is, underneath that truce is we are at war with each other and we are at war with nature. Right? Trying to transform nature into resources. Trying to bend our fellow man to our will. But it's ultimately just a truce based on survival. So in terms of individuals' values have always varied. This is why classes exist in the first place. This is why aristocracy exists. This is why theocracy, monarchy, meritocracy, like all of these things pertain to people's values. Right? Same with ethical systems. So there's never been one thing. They just update and evolve based on, like, let's say the zeitgeist of that time. Like I said earlier on about the ideology that is currently at the head of a society, it will change, right? Just like people's values will change. During war, we become more conservative and we're concerned about reserving resources and stuff. And during apparent peace times, we're a little bit more liberal with how we use our resources and our time. In fact, the clocks just changed last weekend to British summertime because of what's called the Defence of the Realm Act 1914. They literally changed the time so we could get more work in factories during war. So it was never a set in stone thing anyway. That's what I'm trying to say. But I get it, right? If you're more conservative and you think these things are pillars and they shouldn't change, then yeah. But reality is more fluid. No, that's not true though. How can you say you know anything about supernatural things, to be honest? You can't, Dennis. You have beliefs about them. But like even if you were like a skeptic and you say like there's no 100% certainty about anything, supernatural things are definitely something you have less than 90% certainty about. So there's that. What's up, Mimsy? Everyone was born an atheist, bro. Before you could mimic your parents' language and gestures, you were an atheist. Before they imparted to you their cultural beliefs and norms and language, you were an atheist, bro. In fact, up until the point where you was able to contextualize what a god might be, you were an atheist. Everyone that was ever born was born an atheist. Only after the invention of a god. You could be born into a Christian religion, an Islamic religion, a Judaic religion, and still be born an atheist, bro. Oh yeah, that's what I mean, bro. Like, I'm not, to be fair, Dr. 61, I don't know what your actual position is, in all honesty. We are like lightly like talking around geopolitical and economic things, but I tell you this, I'm not very like educated on those subjects. I know very baseline stuff, if that. So I'm not quite sure. We've only got 2 flasks. I'm dead. Yeah, you can have historical events in the Bible, bro. That doesn't mean the supernatural things are true. You can have geographical places in the Bible too. But let's say we swap Mordor for Edinburgh, and I tell you there was a great battle in Mordor, in Edinburgh, where a ring was shattered or whatever, and there were orcs and there were elves and there were dwarfs. Edinburgh is a real place, but it doesn't mean any of what I just told you took place. Actually happened there, right? So those things you have to keep in context. So when you're talking about a religion and a religious text, because the Bible is a religious text, it's a religious text written with a theological agenda. Religion itself pertains to culture, right? The language of people, the moral laws, the food they eat, the prose they write, the poems, the songs, the laws, the ancestors' events like history, right? Geographical places about where geographical facts about where they live. All these things are contained within religious texts and in religions. But when you mix in the supernatural elements with those things, you have to be able to separate the two. What's up, George? So, yes, you can have a real place like Jerusalem written about in the Bible. You can have a real place like Rome and a real set of people like the Roman Empire in the Bible, right? But once you add in sprinkle in the supernatural elements of religion, right? You don't take that telling of that event as an actual historical telling of that event. That's a religious telling of that event. It'd be like I just said, a historical fiction of mixing in real places like Metal Gear Solid, right? Solid Snake doesn't exist, but the presidents in the period of time where Metal Gear Solid takes place actually existed, right? So if you're able to separate these things, you can have a better understanding of what you're saying. But simply there being geographical facts or historical events in the Bible doesn't make the Bible itself a historical book. So just so you're aware of that. Well, as long as he doesn't harden my arteries, I think I'll be just fine. Who's to say? I think that'll be my responsibility ultimately, not to harden them. So no, the Bible is not a historical text, right? That's just it's propaganda that you've been fed. You could do some research for yourself. From an academic point of view, right? The Bible will never be able to be a historical text. It's called a religious text written with a theological agenda. If you was to, for instance, so let's say an event takes place, right, and 3 people tell the story of the same event, but one person mixes in ghosts, ghouls, Dracula and stuff like that, right? Their telling of the event is less reliable than someone who doesn't mix in the supernatural things. Do you know why? Because when we examine reality and we can't place the supernatural things as a point of fact, that means it's not real, right? What's real is what lines up with reality. Okay, so the supernatural things don't line up with reality. That therefore, the person who tells that version of events using the supernatural things is less viable as a historical source for the actual event. Right? On the screen is an AI overview of why that is not a historical text. Again, it's just for visual aids. What I'm saying, put it this way, if you take umbrage with using AI overviews, I understand, but first you need to determine, is the information incorrect? If the information is not incorrect, right, then you're good. Right? You just need to look a bit more in depth in the subject. But if the information is incorrect, by all means, chuck it away. Right? But the Bible is not considered a historical text. Hey, big up to you, Ross, man. Thank you for the gifts. So the AI overview is saying the Bible is not considered a history book in the modern objective sense because its primary purpose is theological, so surrounding ideas of God. It's aiming to convey religious, moral, and spiritual truths rather than precise chronological or secular historical records. Again, even when you're talking about actual historical events talked about in the Bible doesn't, like, it's not written chronologically. It jumps about, like, so timeline wise, or certain kings that existed are spoken about in the context of other time periods and shit like that. So there's lots of issues with the Bible in terms of it being a historical document. Now, the Old Testament was primarily part of the Torah, part of the Jewish canon, right? That text is not designed to be a history book, right? It's designed to encapsulate the culture of the Israelites and the Jews and their ancestors, right? It's about building out the identity of this specific tribe, of this ethnicity. The New Testament bridges the Greek world and the Hebrew world. The New Testament, as it's understood today, is codified by what's called the Roman Empire during Christendom. Okay, so a lot of the events that are talked about in the New Testament take place after the alleged demise of Jesus, and there are different people writing this book at different periods of time, within like a century period of time after the alleged demise of Jesus. Okay, the New Testament was put together to appear as though it was historically accurate, but it is not historically accurate in terms of chronology or chronologically accurate. Okay, so it's called a religious text for a reason. But like I said, even though it's a religious text, you can have actual historical events, you can have geographical facts, right? That's a given. Just like you can have historical events and geographical facts in a historical fiction, like a game or a movie or a book. That's a good point, Aaron. Aaron, no. Yeah, which god? No, I'm not playing on the PC, bro. I'm playing on the PS4. It's not my job to carry you, bro. You're more than welcome to use your words if you know how. No one's gonna stop you. Woo! Yeah, there's also no green in it, or orange. Never heard that from me. Let's get something to eat. No, the Bible is not a history book, right? Again, you don't know what you're talking about. Even if you spoke to a theologian, they would tell you the same thing. It's a religious text. It's what's considered a sacred text because it has theological information in it, right? It pertains to religion. It's not a history book. You bloody lowbrow. I'll be right back. We're having all the snacks this Friday. Yeah, nah, could have it in it. No, don't get me wrong though, right? So the Bible, like any, to be fair, you could say the Bible, the Quran, and the Torah are all really excellent written pieces of literature. They're not just like basic stuff. Lots of people come together, intelligent people as well, come together to put those books together in the way that we have them today. Even the fact that people are still translating them and updating the translations says a lot. But as I said already, it's a religious text that pertains to a religion. It's as simple as that. And I've said it clear as day. Within a religious text, you can have historical events. You can have geographical facts. That doesn't make it a history book. If we start talking about ghosts, ghouls, blessings, curses, dragons, souls, spirits and gods, right? It stops being a book about history, right? It starts being a book about fantasy. So... Oh, sorry, bro. I can read your comment. Give me a minute. I'm looking at 3 different chats. Yes, absolutely, bro. Do you know what I can't read? Is I can't read your name, so I don't know how to address you because I can't pronounce your name. It seems to be Indian, I think, right? So what would you like me to call you? I'm gonna play the game, but I got to eat some snacks. Got to do those human stuffs. My logic is bad. My personal logic is bad. Hey, no worries, Daz. But I agree, yes. The first phase in my hypothesis of humans inventing God does pertain to survival. And they did it using what's called hyperactive agency detection device. So it was about survival primarily, yes. But yeah. As we understand God today, God is the idea and the various concepts of God have all evolved with us. What's up, Brian? You know what's up. Right back. Again, to be honest, arguing about what your Bible has to say is very secondary to the primary topic we're talking about, which is God and the invention of gods. The Bible, as it comes about, like we understand the genealogy of the God of the Bible anyway. So the God of the Bible is devised long before your quoting in the Bible comes about. So the religious text really has a lot more to do with human culture than the actual existence of gods. Because just like in the realm of possibilities, right, God or gods could absolutely exist and religion still be completely wrong about everything they're saying. God or gods could exist and not be responsible for creating anything. God or gods could exist, right? And anyways, right, there's endless possibilities in terms of like modal arguments that could be the case, but in our concrete actualized reality, right, the evidence we have for humans inventing gods far outdoes evidence of gods existing as independent entities, right? Far outweighs it. Okay. Again, I haven't really been too much like educating in this stream. It's more been conversational, which I thought I'd do. On the weekend, I guess we can get a bit more educational and we bring up the visual aids and stuff. But hit zone? I'm not sure what you mean, bro. Well, yeah, Violent. In that sense, in the system of like belief, like religious beliefs, and yeah, there is no wrong and right in terms of that. But when you, what the issue is, right, which I would take umbrage with, is when people try to bend our shared reality to match their beliefs. That can be dangerous on various different levels. Right? We've seen that play out historically. Now, you don't have to call people like that delusional, because there's levels to delusion. There's also variants of delusions, right? Which was I was reading about the other day. It's very interesting. There are various types of delusion, but when people try to bend reality to fit their delusion and then they obtain power to enact their belief on our reality, that's when it's dangerous. So yeah, believing what you want is cool as long as it stays in the privacy of your mind, right? And it doesn't interrupt the well-being and health of other people. But the minute it leaves your mind, it is now also open for critique, and it's also open to be stopped by other people. So you have to consider that. So at the moment where two different sets of ethics clash, and one is belief based and one is reality based, it's likely the reality will win out. Game is Dark Souls 3. I will get back to the chat in a minute. I think we're going to go play some Elden Ring for a while, because I've just been running to war with this guy. Or maybe we should go mine for another hour. Should be fun. Should we listen to you then, Mill 4? Why don't you educate us? So, do you not need to use presupposition when you're speaking? In order to make use of words, you must use presuppositions. So I don't think you understand what you're saying. But I don't need to presuppose your worldview, because I understand it. But maybe that's egotistic to say. That's true, Urban. That's absolutely true. They just believe in no, sorry, I just believe one. So, anyways, yapping. Let's just fight. Oh, this fight's over already. Yeah. So, why don't you explain to me my ministry, what that even means? Give me a reason to think that. Is there anything true about that? So what is the stupid question that I'm asking with no answer? Hit zone. How can you know God created the sun? What information, what background information have you got to verify that? Yeah, so what DR, I mean that's natural, right? That is natural, but there's no rule that says you can't coexist, right? You can't find a middle ground. There's no rule that says that can't be the case. It's just how willing you are to try. I don't know about that, Andrew, right? I used to think that, but when I actually look closer, I've got no good reason to think that we have like sixth sense or supernatural. I think that's more of my cultural indoctrination that makes me think stuff like that. I even catch myself thinking it sometimes now. But don't get me wrong, you could be someone like me, right? Well, who's like more of an agnostic atheist and still find yourself believing random shit about spirits and stuff like that. You could. Now, I don't personally, but every now and again that cultural indoctrination slips in. It's like I have to check myself. Why do I think that? You know? What good reason should I have? Now, just because like I might be cognitively impoverished, right, meaning I can't come up with a good reason at a time, doesn't mean there isn't a reason. But if I don't have a good reason currently to do something, I probably shouldn't do it. You know? Moo! Moo! I'm dead. Alright, so examine the vocabulary that you're using, right? What do you define as a spirit or a soul if you're using it interchangeably? Let's start from there. Oh, I'm messing up. Should be right on it. Yay. Every game that I have, right, I'm just stuck on a boss, so I just stop playing it. So you might be. That's the thing, right? You have to be willing to point the finger in the right direction. And when you say the standard of living is decreasing, would it not be reasonable to examine the kind of propaganda you're ingesting then? Because how could it be that an outside body is responsible for the decline in your living conditions when they don't have that kind of systemic power? No, it'd be like let's say we're all playing Monopoly, right? And we're like well into the game, and then we just allow someone to join the game, and they just have like $2 or $3. They ain't got that much power in the game to buy anything. Any property they land on, one of us will already own it, won't we? Right? So, is what you're saying doesn't actually make sense from that perspective. Now, I was having this discussion with somebody the other day, right? And they obviously I'm assuming based on what they've said, right? They have this view, which is like, let's say, kind of alt-rightish, right leaning, right, about foreigners. And their thing was about work and foreigners. Reality is this, okay? CEOs or owners, business owners in this country exploit not only foreigners but their domestic labourers. The way we could end this, right, is to unionize with both the foreigners and the domestic labourers. Do you know why? The domestic labourer gets undercut by the foreigner because the CEO does it, or the agency that hires on behalf of the business does it. They know the foreigner has nothing, so he will work for less. Right? Whether you're Polish, you're African or Indian, it's the same setup, it's the same scheme. Now, coming from wherever you come from, whatever diaspora you're in, yeah, you will take that opportunity because you have nothing. Well, not that you don't have nothing. Let me not be extreme, right? You're not where you want to be yet, right? So you'll take the opportunity and you'll do the work for less, therefore undercutting the national, right? The person that actually comes from the country. The national will say, look at this menial labour job, right? You want me to do this and that and plus extra things. Culturally, societally, I'm aware of the infrastructure and how it works. So you would be exploiting me by giving me minimum wage to do these tasks, right? A shit job is a shit job, but if you pay me well, I'll do the shit job. That's most nationals' points of view. You want me to do something shit, fine, just pay me well to do it, okay? Problem is, again, not a socialist, not a capitalist. The point of business and capitalism is to extract the most resources with the minimal input. So I put in the least amount of money possible and extract the most amount of money possible. I want the Land Rover Defender. I want the barn house. I want the fucking beach resort. I don't give a shit about Tom that's driving for me, right? Like, just as an example. Tom that's driving for me needs to get as little as possible of the business profit so we can stay profitable, okay? But if Tom is not willing to work for anything under 32k, right? I need to get, you know, Jaren from Eastern Europe to do it for 23k, right? And how do I get Jaren to do it for 23k? All right, I can bend the rules. Tax-wise, I can bend the rules. I can get agencies to sign them on. Then I have to consider, well, should I be thinking about how the implications of modern slavery act on my business? No, not really, because I can do limited liability and have that brushed off on someone else. Okay, so now Jaren comes over, he's got an interpreter for him who links him with the agency, who takes a cut of his pay, and I pay the agency on Jaren's behalf. Now I can undercut Tom, who won't fucking do this shit job for a good wage, right? And get Jaren to do it. But if Jaren and Tom were unified together, right, the CEO couldn't do that shit. So the chances of the National getting the job would be just as good as it always would have been, right? But the reality isn't that. Okay? The exploitation happens at home first. That is what you're seeing. So it's not really the foreigner can't come and make your living circumstances worse. Now, environmentally, yes, they could, but I'll be honest with you, I've moved to places which have been good, and then, like, you know, I say this with respect, like, white trash comes around and it fucks up the whole area, right? So it's really culturally dependent, right? It could be, from your point of view, Asian or black or, you know, Eastern European or wherever it is you are and what you see, based on how your environment currently is and the changes that come in the future, it will be dependent on your situation. But truth be told, it's never going to be that the foreign actor that comes into your country, like, as we're already playing Monopoly, and fucks up Monopoly for everyone already playing. That's not how it works, right? The infrastructure is already in place, as we've been discussing throughout this whole conversation, right? But I'm not saying that it doesn't have an impact, because it does, right? But it's not as deep as you think it is, right? It's actually the middleman. It's the other guy that looks just like you who's running the business for someone else, right? A whole bunch of nepotism, a whole bunch of over-celebrated mediocrity, right? That's the right way to say it. That is what's responsible for the decline in living conditions, right? And again, if you think about the context of Britain, right? Slavery to feudalism to capitalism, the farming industry is still technically functioning under the hangover of colonialism and feudalism, aristocracy, lords and families who end up with these manors and these heritages, right? And these heritages exploit everyone that comes around on the land after the fact, right? Just like there's one guy who's inherited half of, Mayfair from one of his old uncles or some shit like that, or his dad or something. Guy's never worked a day in his life, owns one of the richest parts of the bloody country, just like that, right? Because of the inherited system. So if you're talking about houses, who can actually build houses in the country? How much of the land in the country has been sectioned off and partitioned for farming or nature reserves? It's the same big 5 or 6 housing companies that actually build most of the houses, the new developments, which are all shit and low quality. Why? Because of exploitation, right? Half of them are being built by foreigners and the other half are being built by apprentices. People who've been in tradesmen who are grandfathered in and shit like that, they know the ropes. They're not working for bullshit, right? They won't do it. And if the quality of the job's going to be shit, they'll say, no, this is going to be bad on my firm, so I'm not doing it. But yet these places are still being built, right? So it's actually an inside thing that's happening more than an external thing. People are more just like, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying there isn't a part to play in it, but you're seeing more scapegoats than actual people responsible for it, if that makes sense. But yeah, in both, specifically housing and medicine as well, right? It's not an outside thing. That's a rant, right? So forget about it. It's just a rant. So it's very hard to trick someone who knows how much it costs to make the thing, who knows how much effort it should take to do it, right? And the chances of them actually deciding to go along with you to do it means they've got their own agendas too. But whereas someone who's a newbie just coming into the system blind, or like you know, not innocent, but just like all doe-eyed, they don't know what they're walking into, man. So they will be exploited twice as much as the average Tom. Yay! It wouldn't though, would it? There's never been a time, right, where something was ignored and it just went away. Even if you're talking about a personal health issue, there's never been a time. First thing that needs to happen, right, in the words of a guy called like Diallo Kenyatta, right? It's just like a, let's say, paraphrase, right? You first need to be able to diagnose the issue properly before you can offer any remedy. If you fail to diagnose it properly, just like a doctor would, right, any kind of offering to fix a situation would be useless. And in terms of diagnosing the situation properly, you need to know the history and the context of it. Just like when you go into a doctor's office, they pull up your medical notes because they need to know your medical history, right? Same can be said about a society or an economic issue. It needs to be diagnosed properly first, and then remedy could be put forward. But quick fixes like, you know, blame the foreigner, no, correct term, xenophobia has always been like a look where the finger's pointing but don't look at the finger pointing tactic, you know? One of those ones. That's what you got to think about. Yeah, I would say a minimal impact, right? But again, as I was saying to someone the other day, if you think about the condition of Britain, Britain is technically still in recovery from World War II. As crazy as it sounds, right? Britain as an infrastructure, as a country, is technically still in recovery from World War II. Now, the events leading up to World War II and after World War II play a big part in what we was discussing earlier on about commonwealths, right? The invitation of people from different places to help rebuild industry, right? Okay, so the history of the country, of the thing, of the ailment, right, is necessary for the diagnosis. If you want to dismiss parts, like critical parts of the history, you won't be able to make a correct diagnosis of the situation or an analysis of the situation. Okay, so yes, you're right in a sense. You're seeing, I won't even say you could say like foreigners in a way are becoming both a pawn and a buffer class, but it has been that way. For instance, right, between 2022, I think, and 2025, no, maybe even 2024, 100,000 Ukrainian people were brought into UK during that war period, right? Almost all of them, right? They will report it as, oh, women and children. It's not just women and children, buddy, right? It's not. It never was, right? That's another conversation. But almost all of them have been put into businesses and houses and work immediately. Like, jump the line over nationals and asylum seekers and all other kinds of people, like, almost immediately during the agreement that our country has with Ukraine, right, and the wartime effort, so to speak, right? Things like that are vastly overlooked, right? But things like that also make up the issues that you're talking about. But because it doesn't fit the same patina, as it's easy to spot the other until, you know, dialect is exchanged, right, you don't notice it. Another thing you probably not realize is the majority of your products, which come from factories, it's Eastern European and Asians that are running all of those factories, doing all of the bloody work, right? But it's not in your face, so you don't realize it, okay? So if you was to say, just stop people coming over would solve the problem, you'd have massive holes in industry almost overnight. Because the British public isn't aware of what's actually holding the infrastructure up. Right? They're only seeing their estate, their family group, their job, and not outside of that. But there's many people from many places holding up the whole infrastructure that is Britain. Okay. So and like I was saying earlier on, if we're still recovering from World War Two, and you still got what's called the colonial hangover happening, right? There's lots of infrastructure work to be done still, yeah. And don't help that we keep getting ourselves involved in other skirmishes. So you know, I understand the sentiment, but I also think it's like a, so you get what's called, like when you're doing sales and stuff like that, you get what's called like pressure points. You know, like some people are taught to speak, right? So like in the more simplified, like the stupid type of media world, you get people who give a sob story, right? You see it on X Factor, you see it in guys be like, oh yeah, like my dad didn't live with me, so like, you know, one time my dad got drunk, he beat my mum, but that's my sob story, right? That's my pressure point. Oh, I went to jail, da, da, da. That's my pressure point, right? These things are used as pressure points so that more fringe ideologies and views can infiltrate politics or politically. Right? So you might be saying, actually, right, from an economic standpoint, this is my issue. Someone sees that as your pressure point and says, ah, I've got the key to your economic pressure point. It's this, which just so happens to help my personal ideology, right? Whether that's like, you know, racism, xenophobia, whatever it is, right? It helps progress my agenda by using your pressure points, right? Whether that's a systemic pressure point, an economic pressure point, a health pressure point, you know, a travel pressure point, whatever it is, right? It's part and parcel of how people operate. So don't get me wrong, right? You're like, yeah, I don't know you, I don't know where you're from or what you think, what your political leaning is, but if you're aware of the like tactics that are being used around you, then you'll know, like, whenever we start viewing that group of people as all bad and our group of people as all good, we're in trouble. That's what you should know. And then there's a bunch of other rhetoric tactics around those conversations that lead you down that road. And before you know it, people are saying to you, you're with Hitler over there, and you're like, well, how am I with Hitler, bro? I'm just like in my country. And then you know, maybe a war happens, and a century after, you're like, oh shit, I actually was with Hitler. it's like, oh, actually, this is setting in now. Do you know, like that's the kind of shit you got to be aware of, right? And this is one of those things, okay? But anyways, that's a big derailment from the main topic. The main topic is supposed to be about humans inventing God, but we keep coming back to these things. Oh, it's only like 11 o'clock. I think I'll stay a bit longer. But again, it's just as if you want to say a caveat, this is just my opinion based on the information I currently have, bro. Could be wrong. Could be wrong about a bunch of stuff. I'm just working with the information I currently have. It's like and you can kind of see the splitting of those factions in some of these far right and far left groups, right? It's like, oh, I came into this for this. I didn't know that's what they were doing. Yeah, of course you didn't fucking know, right? It's like you were being used. So it's like, a really good visualizer. If you've ever seen The Dark Knight, right? The one with Heath Ledger. In the beginning of The Dark Knight, you got the Joker, right? And you got a bunch of people wearing Joker masks, and they're all doing a bank job together. And each one in the bank job, each member of the Joker clan in the bank job has been told to kill their partner so there's more money for them. So the Joker systematically has all of the people on the bank job kill each other for him. Alright? It's the same thing of how these ideologies operate and how you get these splintering within these political parties or within these movements, right? It's the same basic human psychology. Oh yeah, you lot going off on YouTube. That's crazy talk. It's crazy talk. Alright, how long have we been on? Almost. That. Oh, that's a lot of views. It's pretty cool. Alright, see you later, Gadber. Yeah, that's a type of politics as well, though, isn't it? It could be described as pandering. And again, like, politicians are no different than like the business class. They're designed. They're taught to speak in certain ways that allow them to maneuver amongst people to get what they want. It's a lot of sycophants within these places. So yeah. Now, you should. I think there's an old saying like, is it an iron hand in a silk glove or something like that? You should have the capacity to say the thing you want to say that cuts through, but do it in a way that's like Machiavellian enough so you can still operate. You know? But yeah, there's compassion, then there's pandering. That's for real. There's a difference. Yeah, of course they would, that. Absolutely. Agreed, Brent. Agreed. Alright, anyways. We are coming up midday, so I think we'll have a couple more for that day. It's more hours than we need. Alright, so I might come on tomorrow for the rest of the weekend, perhaps. Then we'll get more into the actual main conversation. Today's been more just a chat. More chat than anything else, really. No worries, man. Make sure you hit that subscribe, Doctor. In a way, Brent. In a way. Humans most definitely invented God. All concepts of God come from the minds of humans. There's no evidence that gods exist independently of us. So, with that in mind, about to grab Shadow. Go for it, bro. I'm still stuck on the Mesmer boss. I think we'll play some more of that this weekend. But I think that's about enough for me for now. The morning's over. And your morning is just beginning. Who's in there? Couple faces I recognise. Alright, anyways, man, thank you all for tuning in. Hopefully you learned something, or at least you was entertained. That being said, enjoy your day. Oh yes, thanks for follow as well. A subscribe goes a long way, and a like, even though the stream's about to end, still goes a long way. So appreciate you. See you later.